Hello everyone. Today we are going to dive into 7 real-life cases, each of which has garnered public and media attention. While investigating each of these 7 cases, the detectives faced some challenges. However, evidence, witness testimony, and in some cases, surveillance footage eventually made it possible to get to the truth. In this video, we will look at the events that occurred in California. 28-year-old Corey Desmond disappeared in Redondo Beach while leaving her bartending job on Valentine's Day 2009. A few days later, her body was found in a plastic trash bag on the side of the road in Running Springs in San Bernardino County. The police had different versions of what happened. However, a few months later, the investigation reached a dead end. The breakthrough occurred after a woman who saw a billboard with a picture of Corey called the police department. Corey Day Desmond was born March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital, and right from the start, she was the center of attention because she had to fight to survive. Due to a hole in her diaphragm, she had to undergo multiple surgeries. She was only given a 20% chance of survival, and miraculously, she not only survived, but she thrived. Friends and family of Desmond knew her as a smart, self-confident young woman, unafraid to express her opinion, who was energetic and full of affection for those she cared about, who were many. Desmond graduated from North Torrance High School and earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. Unsure of her calling in life, she changed her mind and decided to become a teacher. Her goal was to teach autistic children. A week after her death, a notice came in the mail that she had earned her teaching credential. She was loved by many and friends to all. She was sweet at times, but could be tough as nails. She could command a bar full of patrons when she wanted, and all the while be singing one of her favorite karaoke songs such as Black Velvet or These Boots Were Made for Walking, and once again, being the center of attention. It was that secondary family that Corey acquired while working in those various establishments that kept her going back despite what her family wanted her to do. In 2009, Corey worked in a bar. On Saturday, February 14th, she had a shift that ended at 9:30 p.m. She then walked 2 blocks to the popular Bar Street Lounge. Many employees of this bar knew Corey, as she had friends working there. She was caught on surveillance cameras helping her friends at the bar. She left there only after closing, around 2 a.m. None of her friends saw her after that. On Monday, February 16th, at approximately 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a terrifying call. About 100 miles from the bar where people last saw Corey, the driver stopped to take snow chains off the wheels. The man felt a strong, unpleasant smell as soon as he exited the car. He thought the source of the stench was an animal that got hit by a car, but still decided to check. Not far from the car, he found something strange. He saw a black plastic garbage bag with a woman's body inside. The man ran out into the road in a panic, stopping cars and asking to call the police as his phone's battery was dead. They identified the victim by fingerprints and driver's license. It was 28-year-old Corey Day Desmond. Subjected to a brutal attack, the woman died from strangulation. She had a lot of bruises on her face and neck and injuries to the back of her head. Corey tried to fight back, as she had several defense wounds. Although unable to determine the exact time of death, the medical experts said Corey was on the street for about 36 hours before the man found her. Corey's pants were unbuttoned and pulled to her knees, but no signs of intimate contact were found. The first conclusion that investigators came to was that the place where the driver found Corey's body was not the place of her death. The criminal left her body by the side of the road, hoping it would take time to find it. Before the man found her body, the rain destroyed all possible evidence. Reporting bad news to the families of the dead or missing is perhaps the hardest thing in the work of a policeman. At that time, Corey was living with her grandmother. The news about the granddaughter's body found in a garbage bag shocked the woman, and this news was no less devastating for Mark, Corey's father. Mark knew perfectly well how the system worked. Sometimes the police delay the investigation for many months because they need a warrant to conduct searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. There are cases when the time-consuming bureaucracy slows down the process of solving a crime. Therefore, Mark decided not to sit and wait for the police to find the person who deprived him of his daughter. He decided to act. He said love for his daughter gave him the strength to look for the criminal. Mark found Corey's Jeep Wrangler in an alley next to the bar where she worked. He also discovered that Corey disappeared on the night of February 15th, but unfortunately, no one knew about it. Grandma did not panic because Corey was already an adult and could stay overnight with a friend or friends. In addition, she often worked late into the night and came home when her grandmother was already asleep. Investigators went to the bar where Desmond worked to find possible witnesses or leads. They talked to other employees and learned that Corey finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then went to another bar. She often did that. Her friends worked at that bar, and Corey often visited them at the end of her shift. She helped at the bar or chatted with friends while sitting at the counter. Besides, it brought her extra tips. Bar visitors knew her face well, and many perceived Corey as another employee. Surveillance cameras confirmed the words of the visitors. They captured the girl helping her friends at the bar. Unfortunately, a bartender's job is not only to pour drinks and entertain the interlocutors. Sometimes, after drinking alcohol, some people stop controlling their emotions and their behavior becomes inappropriate. That evening, Corey was unlucky enough to meet such a person. According to eyewitnesses, she argued with some man who behaved provocatively. He bothered women and unceremoniously touched them, making unflattering compliments. While everyone was silent and did not dare to put this man in his place, Corey stood up for the bar's visitors. In other words, the girl explained to the man that he was not welcome there. The violent guest was furious, but still agreed to leave. Corey continued to help her friends and made drinks at the bar as if nothing had happened. That evening, she consumed alcohol, but it did not affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., she left the bar alone and planned to go home. But as we now know, a man found Corey's lifeless body 100 miles from the bar the next day. Mark gave the police all the information he could find. Through television, he appealed to everyone to report any crucial information for the investigation. Meanwhile, the police identified the man Corey quarreled with before her death. During a conversation with investigators, the man said he did not know who Corey Desmond was. However, he did not deny having a big fight with the girl in a bar on February 14th. The man said alcohol made him uncontrollable, confirming that they kicked him out of the bar. Right after that, he went home to sleep. The suspect denied any involvement in the crime. He agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. They carefully examined the suspect's car. After all, there could have been traces like bloodstains, hair, or something belonging to Corey. The car was dirty both inside and outside, and yet forensic experts did not find any evidence there. While searching the man's house, they found nothing indicating his involvement in the crime. The last hope of the investigators to catch the man in a lie was a polygraph test, but the man passed it without much difficulty, answering all the questions of the police. In addition, his wife confirmed that he came home before 2 a.m. and immediately went to bed. Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., which means this man was not involved in her death. Thus, the police excluded him from the list of suspects, but the problem was that they had no other persons of interest in this investigation. They studied Corey's personal life, trying to find out if she had enemies who could wish her harm. Investigators found out another strange detail. The owner of the bar where Corey worked said that night, she came and asked for permission to use the toilet. But since the bar was closed, he refused the girl's request and advised her to go home. It was about 2:20 in the morning. What happened next remained a mystery because Corey never got in the car and did not go home. Investigators assumed that she had been abducted or assaulted near her place of work. However, the bar's surveillance cameras did not record this, and there were no witnesses on the street at such a late hour. At the time of Corey's death, her blood alcohol content was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving. It was unclear whether she planned to use her car or was looking for other ways to get home. Unfortunately, she did not meet anyone who would help her that night. A month later, the investigation reached a dead end. The police checked all the versions and clues but found no new suspects. Corey's father, Mark, wasn't going to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Artesia Boulevard in Redondo Beach. The billboards contained a photo of his daughter with the question, "Who killed Corey Day Desmond?" The man offered a $15,000 reward for any information helpful to the police. "I'm going to keep them up there to let people know the guy is still out there," Mark Desmond said. "Maybe it will save somebody." To some extent, this story is similar to the one of Alexandra Kemp. The latter's father, Roger, did everything to find the criminal, and billboards played a crucial role in solving the crime. If you haven't watched this story yet, click on the link at the end of this video. Information about Corey periodically appeared on 50 electronic billboards. Eventually, it brought results. In May 2009, the phone rang at the police station. A woman named Tiffany Ware saw one of the billboards with a photo of Corey. Thanks to this woman, the police were able to solve this case. Tiffany spoke very quietly. The woman was experiencing stress and severe fright. She rambled as if she didn't know where to start. Then she finally focused and said, "Hello, my name is Tiffany. I think my boyfriend Tony Lopez Perez killed that bartender girl, Corey Day Desmond. Please check him. He's behaving strangely, but I'll tell you more when we meet." Tiffany called several times to arrange a meeting with the detective. During their conversation in the park, the woman told him about her suspicions. According to her, on February 14th, she and Tony planned a romantic Valentine's Day dinner. She spent the whole evening preparing for a date. Tiffany took the children to their grandparents, visited a beauty salon, and bought a new red dress. Tony loved it when she wore red clothes. It drove him crazy. The guy was working that day, but had to return home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited for Tony almost all night. The woman tried to contact him, but he did not answer calls and messages. Tony returned home at 4:30 in the morning and, as if nothing had happened, said he was too drunk to go home. He said he fell asleep in his car. Tiffany mentioned that Tony rarely cleaned the interior of his car. However, after a few days, he bought a whole set of cleaning products. He washed the car thoroughly, not letting her help. The guy's behavior seemed strange, but at that moment, she did not attach much importance to it. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for almost nothing and bought another car. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. A little later, they had a joint trip to Big Bear Lake. They chatted along the way, and everything seemed normal until Tony suddenly stopped the car on the side of the road. He turned to Tiffany and asked her, "Do you think this dead girl, what was her name, the bartender, was dumped here? I'm almost 100% sure that the police found her body here." Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany Ware lived together for about 4 years. They had a 6-year-old son together, but they never married. He was a hardworking man and got along well with everyone. He has never had any problems with the law. Perez came from a large family with 8 siblings. His parents grew up in the LA area, and Perez attended high school in Manhattan Beach. Tony's absence on the day of Corey's death, cleaning the car and urgently selling it, a strange trip, and an equally strange comment about where the police found her body, a change of phone number, and odd behavior. Putting all these facts together, Tiffany realized that Tony could be the one who took the life of Corey Desmond. She didn't want to believe it. The investigators decided to talk to Tony and went to his house. To prevent him from suspecting anything, Tiffany agreed to play along with the police, not telling him anything about this conversation. It looked as if they were conducting a routine interview of people to find witnesses in the Corey Desmond case. Tony looked calm, like a person with nothing to hide. He wasn't nervous while answering all the questions. He said he didn't know her, mentioning he had only seen Corey in the newspapers. However, to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for taking the life of Corey, they needed hard evidence. Thus, the police found the new owner of the Dodge that Tony sold shortly after the news of Corey's death. The new owner confirmed that Tony sold him his car for a low price. He allowed the police to check the vehicle for any evidence. Tiffany said Tony cleaned the interior thoroughly before selling his car. However, when the experts applied luminol and used an ultraviolet lamp, it became evident why Tony Lopez Perez got rid of his car. The interior of the car lit up in bright blue. The police asked Tony to come to the police station. They didn't tell him anything about the find, so he wouldn't run away. At first, he claimed he had never seen Corey, but later changed his testimony, saying he saw her near the bar and whistled at her. As soon as the police noticed that the man was changing his testimony, they showed him photos of the car he had sold and said that they had found crucial evidence there. This time, Tony claimed to have seen Corey outside the bar. Standing under a street lamp, she suddenly lost consciousness and fell on the sidewalk. He tried to help her, but she did not regain consciousness. Then he started slapping Corey on the cheeks. Corey opened her eyes and started screaming. She told him to get out and asked him to let her go. According to Tony, he got scared, put his hands over her mouth, and accidentally strangled her. Fearing he would get blamed for Corey's death, he put her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. Perez said he woke up during the night and went outside to see if it was a nightmare. "I opened the door and it was not a nightmare," Perez told detectives. "It was true." Perez said he went back inside and tried to get some sleep. In the morning, he went to work with Desmond's body still in the back seat. At the end of the working day, he placed her body in 2 garbage bags, took it to a remote area, and left it next to the side of the road. According to Tony's story, what he did to Corey was an accident. He claimed that he was drunk and scared. He accidentally strangled her in a state of panic, but Corey's injuries suggested otherwise. She had severe injuries on the back of her head, bruises on her face and neck, and defense wounds on her hands. Moreover, Corey's pants were down to her knees. Tony Perez was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. The next day, he showed the police where he dumped Corey's body. In addition to Tony's confession, they now had the results of DNA tests. Corey's blood matched the blood found in the car that Tony sold immediately after committing the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the multiple contusions to the victim's head, the evidence of strangulation, and the blunt force trauma to her face. Sheridan also said she had scratches on her body that suggested the criminal dragged her after her death. Based on Corey's injuries, prosecutors said Perez assaulted her and tried to force her into intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. Corey resisted. Unable to get what he wanted, Perez strangled her. Tiffany Ware testified during the trial. She told the San Bernardino County jury that her former boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Even though they were making love almost every day, Ware said Perez was still not satisfied. Tiffany also told the court that Tony had twice engaged in intimacy with her against her will. It happened after the birth of their son and with an interval of about a month. Both incidents occurred when she was fast asleep on the couch after taking painkillers due to severe back pain. Perez, who chose not to testify at the trial, made his first statements to the court during his sentencing. He said he was taught to love and respect those around him, but that he veered off course at times. "I forgot the key lessons I was taught about in life, which make me a man, a father, a loving uncle to many, and a responsible person who supports his family that I so love," Perez said. "In the end, I fell short." He generally stuck to the story his attorney Andrew Hanel presented at the trial, that he was scared and didn't mean to hurt Desmond. Hanel argued to a jury of 6 men and 6 women that Perez found her passed out on the sidewalk. He said he tried to calm her down and didn't mean to kill her. "I should have thought before acting," Perez said. "I should have stepped back and cleared my head. Fear took over. I was so scared, so careless." Corey's father, Mark Desmond, said his daughter had a beautiful future ahead of her before her life was cut short at the age of 28. Tony Perez should live the rest of his miserable life knowing he killed his own children's hopes and dreams at the same time he was killing Corey, her father said. He embodies all the characteristics that women in society fear. Just before sentencing, Perez asked God and the court to show him mercy. "My very deepest apologies to the Desmond family and to my own family. I have brought such hurt and sorrow to the Desmonds that will forever shape their life. I hope he never gets out in the street again," said Desmond's grandmother, Beverly. "I hope he suffers as much as she suffered." In July 2011, a jury of 6 men and 6 women found 36-year-old Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family expressed gratitude to Tiffany Ware, thanks to whom the police solved this case. "If it hadn't been for her, I don't think they would have ever found out it was him," said Leslie Schwab, a family friend who attended every day of the trial, along with about a dozen others in San Bernardino County. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll delve into the events that occurred in Ujaras, Costa Rica in 2020. 18-year-old Allison Bonilla was returning home by bus when she noticed 2 men following her. Scared, she texted her mother and boyfriend, saying she'd run home after she got off the bus. Unfortunately, Allison never returned home that day, and it took about 6 months to find her. Allison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. Being the only child in the family, Allison lived with her mother, Yendri Vasquez. But Yendri wasn't the only one involved in Allison's upbringing. Allison's grandparents, Ramon and Marjorie, and Aunt Xiomara, often helped Yendri. According to Yendri, Allison's father left them immediately after she was born. He was in a relationship with another woman who was pregnant at the time. He abandoned his wife and daughter to be with her. He didn't want to be a part of Allison's life. Yendri said there was only one time when he asked to meet his daughter. He had lung cancer at the time, and that was the only reason she allowed him to meet Allison. It's worth saying that his second family didn't even know about Allison's existence until almost the whole country heard about her disappearance. Allison was very close to her mother. She considered Yendri both her mom and her dad. It may seem strange, but she always gave her mother gifts for Father's Day. Their relationship was much closer than the one between mother and daughter. They were best friends who did everything together. Allison could tell Yendri absolutely anything without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Allison had a large family, and although she didn't have a father, she didn't feel lonely or abandoned. She loved spending time with her family and going to church every Sunday. Relatives described Allison as a very kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. She always looked happy in the photos. There wasn't even the slightest hint of sadness or longing in her eyes. Allison has dreamed of working in the modeling business all her life. She dropped out of the 8th grade to take makeup classes because combining school with makeup classes seemed too hard. Allison didn't want to waste time on an education that couldn't help her reach her goals. She soon started looking for a job to help her mother with the bills. Yet, every time Allison would drop off her resume at places, she wouldn't get any callbacks. Yendri saw that her daughter was very depressed about this. Knowing Allison wasn't suitable for any job because of her incomplete education, Yendri advised her to attend night school. Therefore, at 18, Allison enrolled in a school, Liceo Enrique Guir Sens, located a few miles from her home. While studying at school, she received a certificate of completion of pastry courses and began making cakes. The cakes and other desserts made by Allison were just amazing. Everyone in the neighborhood was delighted with her cakes, so it became a good way for her to earn money. Allison was in a romantic relationship with Harold Segura Solano, who lived in Cachi. Cachi is a district of the Paraíso Canton in the Cartago province of Costa Rica. Allison usually spent the first half of the day at home with her mom. Later, she would meet with Harold and then go to evening school at 6 p.m. Therefore, she always returned home quite late, most often by bus. The path from the bus stop to her house ran through a quite dangerous place. It was a road with a lot of vegetation and an almost complete absence of light and people. So Allison always informed her mother of changes in her location. Sometimes, her mother even met her at a bus stop or the bridge halfway along the way. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mom's salon to get a manicure and chat with her. After that, she visited her friend Paola, who studied at school with her. They spent about 15 minutes at Paola's house and then went to school together. They arrived there around 6 p.m. and split up, as both were in different courses. After spending about 15 minutes in an empty classroom, Allison realized that the school had canceled her classes that day. She decided the best way to continue the evening would be to visit her aunt, who lived near the school. Her aunt wasn't home, so Allison decided to spend time with her boyfriend Harold before going home. However, he wasn't home. His mother said he was at work and was supposed to return soon, inviting Allison to the house to wait for him. When Harold returned, they had a big family dinner, chatting on various topics and discussing plans. After a while, Harold excused himself, saying he would be back soon. He needed to leave urgently. At about 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This moment was a start of a series of events that the whole country soon learned about. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later, and when he saw that Allison had left, he started texting her. He asked where she was and offered to take her home on his motorcycle. Allison immediately replied that she was already at the bus stop, so there was no need to worry. While waiting for the bus, Allison texted her friend Paula and asked if her cousin could take her home on his bike. He refused, saying his bike was a professional cycling bike unsuitable for two people. It remains unclear why she didn't ask her boyfriend for help. Perhaps she was angry with him or didn't want to bother him. As a result, Allison went home by bus. She got off the bus at about 8:43 p.m. Her home was about a mile away. Allison asked her mom to walk towards her as she had a bad feeling and was afraid. At 8:45 p.m., she texted her boyfriend and mother, saying two suspicious men were following her. They got off the bus at the same stop as her. Therefore, she decided to run home to lose them. As I have already mentioned, the road that Allison was going to run along was quite dangerous. There were almost no lights, and people rarely used it. There was only one surveillance camera there. It captured a blurry spot, which presumably was Allison. When Yendri, Allison's mom, came to the bridge half a mile from home to meet her daughter, she didn't find her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that maybe Allison had returned to the bus stop as a safety measure, but she didn't find her there either. Then she decided that Allison might not have noticed her and was already home. Yet, when Yendri returned home, she found the house empty. Yendri started calling the family and her daughter's friends, asking if they knew where Allison might be and inviting them to join the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up to a phone call from Allison's aunt, Xiomara. She told him Allison was missing. He immediately started calling her, but it was all in vain. Her phone was unreachable. 3 hours later, Allison Bonilla was reported missing after her mother contacted the police. They started a search. Fortunately, Yendri knew how her daughter was dressed. As earlier, Allison had asked to take a picture of her in this outfit. Here's the last photo of Allison. At the beginning of the investigation, the police checked every place from the bus stop to Allison's house. They also examined various locations near the city, including Lake Catchy and the hydroelectric dam of the same name. On March 5, 2020, the police found the first clue, Allison's glasses. They were in the grass a mile from her house, but Allison seemed to disappear into thin air. After another 8 days, they found Allison Bonilla's ID on a coffee plantation. It was strange since they already searched that entire area many times before. Another suspicious fact was that her ID was in a too perfect place, easy to notice. There wasn't any dirt on it, as if someone had deliberately put it there to mislead the investigation or hide some details. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendri received a call from Allison's father. Instead of offering his help or sympathy, he said that Allison went missing because she was too beautiful. Yendri did not expect such soulless words, so she immediately hung up. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Some time passed, and Allison's family, police, and volunteers continued searching for her nonstop. Every Sunday, they went outside and hung posters with Allison's photo. One day, they decided to paint messages on the street with Allison's steps from crossing to the bridge, where it's believed she got lost. They painted 7 different messages, and one of them said, "Allison, we're waiting for you." In addition, they put posters on poles next to the road so that those passing by could notice it. At the same time, the police got a crucial lead. A man came to the police station and said he knew Allison and had seen her the night she disappeared. According to him, on March 4th at about 8:30 p.m., he left the house on his motorcycle to pick up someone. While he was driving, he saw Allison, and he also saw a two-door wine-colored BMW pull up next to her. He said he then turned around to see what was going on. He realized who the car belonged to. It was his cousin's BMW. It had bright yellow headlights, a distinctive feature of this vehicle. That's why he was 100% sure it was his cousin's car. In addition, another man also told police that he saw the same BMW that evening near the place where Allison disappeared. It belonged to 28-year-old Nelson Sanchez Urania, known locally as Sukia, since, according to the public, he was a member of a local gang. As it turned out, Nelson knew Allison. Their families had known each other for a long time. For a while, they even lived in the same neighborhood. Allison's mom later said she only had one interaction with him. It was just a neighborly relationship rather than a friendly one. One day, Nelson offered Allison and her cousins a ride home, to which she agreed since it was daylight. She was not alone and considered him a decent person. On March 2nd, 2020, 2 days before Allison disappeared, Nelson sent her a Facebook message asking her to answer some questions. On the advice of her cousin, Allison agreed. Nelson then asked Allison how she felt about him. He wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was puzzled, as she did not understand the meaning of such a question. They weren't friends, and they hardly knew each other. When Allison asked Nelson why he was asking this, he replied, "It's because I don't think bad of you, but I just wanted to ask you if you thought bad of me." Allison replied that she didn't dislike him, assuring him everything was fine between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. On March 26, 2020, detectives obtained a warrant to search the house and confiscate Nelson Sanchez Urania's car, mobile phone, and computer. His phone contained some very disturbing things. There were a lot of pictures saved on his phone showing the abuse of women. During the search of his car, the police noted the perfect cleanliness in it. As it turned out, someone cleaned the carpet and seats with polishing liquid. Yet, the front carpet of the driver's seat and the trunk carpet were missing. The police found hair and drops of blood on the trunk lid and sent it to the laboratory for analysis. After completing the visual inspection of the car, the police conducted a test with a service dog. It showed possible traces of blood on the two front seats and in the trunk of the vehicle. The luminol exam confirmed it. It's a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in blood cells. Traces of blood, which the owner tried to destroy with cleaning products, were found in many places in the car interior. While the detectives were waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson Sanchez Urania was a free man, but he was under surveillance. They monitored his every move to ensure he did not leave the city or the country. Yendry insisted that the investigators arrest him, but the police had no grounds for this yet, so he remained at large for several months. Yendry thought someone kidnapped Allison to later ask for a monetary reward for her return. She tried to stay calm and not panic. She hoped her daughter was still alive. She left Allison's room untouched. She didn't make the bed. She didn't rearrange things. She also bought gifts for her daughter in case she returned home. "I will continue to do this because until I see anything that proves that she is dead, my daughter is alive and will return home," she told reporters. On September 2, 2020, detectives finally received results from the laboratory confirming that the hair and blood found in Nelson Sanchez Urania's car belonged to Allison. The police arrested him on the same day. Later, Urania's ex-girlfriend told the police that he had never physically harmed her, but there was a lot of moral pressure in their relationship. He did not allow her to communicate with friends or use the internet. According to her, he only wanted an intimate relationship with her. Urania's former boss said he treated his work irresponsibly and once even stole about $1,000. In addition, they interviewed his landlord, who said that one of Urania's ex-girlfriends left him because she was tired of paying his bills. She called him a very spoiled man. On September 4th, Nelson Sanchez Urania confessed what he had done to Allison Bonilla. According to him, On the night Allison disappeared, driving by, he saw her alone, walking along an empty road. He decided to take advantage of the fact that it was late at night. Nelson realized Allison would not be afraid to get into his car because she knew him. He offered to give her a ride, to which she agreed and got into the car, but instead of going home, he turned the other way and took her to a coffee plantation, where he forced her to get out of the car. Nelson hit her so hard that her glasses fell off, and she almost fainted. After that, he took her to a nearby abandoned house where he had intercourse with her against her will and then severely beat her. Urania then took her to the front seat of his car to tie her hands with some cloth and duct tape. Then, Urania put her in the trunk and drove to a landfill in San Geronimo Cachi. There, he threw Allison off a cliff into a pile of garbage. He explained his actions by using too many illegal substances. He said he was heavily under their influence. He also explained that he was obsessed with Allison. According to him, when he saw her that night, he knew that this was the right moment to realize his obscene fantasies. As is often the case in such stories, Nelson Sanchez Urania later retracted his confession, saying that the police had put pressure on him, but there was enough evidence against him to bring charges. The maximum sentence he faced was 35 years. Early in the morning on September 4th, the search team went to the landfill in San Geronimo to search for Allison's body, but since the area was too vast and not easily accessible, finding Allison's remains was not an easy task. In addition, 6 months have passed since her disappearance. Only 25 days after Urania's confession, the police found human bones, vertebrae, ribs, part of the pelvis, a femur, fragments of clothes that Allison was wearing on the day of her disappearance, as well as one sneaker with nails inside. The police sent all these clues for examination. Jose Francisco Herrera, the suspect's lawyer, said the evidence could have been falsified because it was found by a group of volunteer rescuers, not the judicial police. In addition, Herrera said it was strange the authorities had found human remains in the area specified by Urania on the same day when his client changed his statement and said he wasn't guilty. Bonilla family's lawyer, Rodrigo Araya, criticized the change in the suspect's testimony, saying the incident was a mockery of the authorities' work. On October 5, 2020, the experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison Bonilla. Since the search team didn't find all parts of Allison's body, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of her death. However, the expert who examined the remains concluded that numerous fractures on her body occurred after death, indicating a fall from a great height. The clothes found were torn and there were bite marks on the sneakers, so experts concluded it could have been the work of animals, and that is why the remains were in different parts of the landfill. Yendri, Allison's mom, was furious that the police hadn't listened to her and hadn't arrested Urania earlier. Maybe he would have confessed even earlier, and then Allison's body could still be intact. It was a great tragedy for the whole family. "It's an unimaginable pain that I'm going through, but she's in a better place where no one will hurt her," Yendri said. The trial of Nelson Sanchez Urania began on July 19, 2021. One of the witnesses at the trial was Allison's boyfriend, Harold Segura Solano. In his statement, he said Allison was at his house with his mother when he returned from work at about 6:30 p.m. on March 4, 2020. At some point, he left for 5 or 10 minutes. Upon returning, Harold saw that Allison had left without saying goodbye. He kept in touch with her through text messages while she was on her way home. After she got off the bus, she informed him that 2 men were following her. With that in mind, Harold insisted that she should take a taxi. He said he would pay the taxi driver himself, but Allison refused twice and texted him that she would run to her house. He didn't receive any more messages from her after that. However, according to him, he informed only his mother about the situation. He didn't contact Yendri, Allison's mother. He explained that he didn't do it because his phone's battery had run out, and then he fell asleep for 30 minutes. He discovered that his girlfriend was missing from Allison's aunt, who called him. From that moment on, He said he got scared and called Allison's cell phone several times, but all calls went straight to voicemail. WhatsApp messages were also not getting through. Harold indicated that he had been part of the search team for several days, but stopped because he did not feel fit and had to work. No doubt he wanted things to be different. If he could rewind time, he would have taken Allison home that evening, but unfortunately, nothing can be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson Sanchez Urania to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison Bonilla. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Urania knew about the path and time of Allison's return home and that he planned to attack her. Moreover, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Urania had forced her into intimacy. But this is not the end of the story. Allison's family was very disappointed with the verdict. In their opinion, this was not a fair punishment. In 2022, the family's lawyer filed an appeal. The court overturned Urania's sentence and scheduled a new trial. On September 28, 2023, the court sentenced Nelson Sanchez Urania to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer pointed out that Urania acted wildly, cowardly, and inhumanly, and took advantage of the victim and her loved one's trust. According to the court, Urania's actions were premeditated. Allison had known Urania for several years, so he took advantage of this to commit a crime. Urania showed no remorse, and the criminal court took this into account. Despite feeling pain and anger, the family was happy with the new verdict, which finally closed this chapter of their lives, ending this nightmare that lasted more than 3 years. Allison's family placed a cross and laid flowers where she was found. They made for her something like a small altar with her photo and a statue of the Virgin Mary. The Allison Bonilla case has had a strong impact on Costa Rican media and social networks, even sparking several marches in memory of the young woman and other women who had previously suffered under similar circumstances, such as Maria Luisa Cedeno and Luani Salazar. A link to the story of Maria Luisa Cedeno should now appear on your screens. What do you think about this story? Share your opinion in the comments, and thank you for watching this video to the end. This video explores a story that took place in 2014. The case of a 27-year-old young woman named Charlie Scott drew the attention of some of the biggest TV stations and became one of the most high-profile cases in Hawaii's history.
Charlie Scott.
Charlie Scott.
Carly Scott.
Charlie Scott.
Carly Scott.
Charlie Scott.
Charlie Scott.
And Carly Scott.
Carly Joanne Charlie Scott was born on November 24, 1986, in California, United States. She was the daughter of Kimberlyn and Robert Scott. Her family members called her Charlie, and that is why I will refer to her as such hereafter. Charlie had a few sisters with whom she was very close. After the divorce of her parents, she was brought up by her mother and stepfather. Charlie and her family had been residing on the Hawaiian island of Maui for several years by 2014. Charlie was graduating from cosmetology school and had dreams of opening a beauty salon for dogs. She really cared about dogs and had 2 of them. Charlie faced a few difficulties in her life, which I will discuss later, but generally, she was a happy and optimistic young woman with a bright outlook on the future. Charlie lived in Makawao along with her 2 dogs and had last been seen on February 9, 2014, at a family meeting held in Haiku at her sister's house, about 6 miles from Makawao. Charlie was expected to see her family again the next day, but she never showed up to meet them. Her mother, Kimberlyn, began to get seriously worried that evening when she couldn't reach Charlie, so she and her other daughter, Phaedra, got in the car and drove to Makawao. When they got to the house where Charlie lived, it was already around 9 p.m., and it had been 24 hours since they had last seen her. Kimberlyn's first observation was that her daughter's car was not in the driveway. Charlie owned a silver 1997 Toyota 4Runner with Hawaiian license plates and an LED skull embedded in the grille. The front door was locked, but the window was open, so Phaedra snuck into the house and unlocked the front door for her mother so Kimberlyn could get inside too. The house was in order, with all the things lying in their proper places. Kimberlyn and Phaedra looked through all the rooms, but there was no one in the house except for one of the dogs. Charlie had disappeared along with her other dog, Nala. This was a rather unusual situation, as Charlie had never left without alerting any of her family members. Her family's anxiety was growing by the minute because they were unable to contact Charlie. None of her friends knew where she was either. She had always been in touch with her family, which was why Kimberlyn immediately had a bad feeling. Even more worrisome was the fact that Charlie was 5 months pregnant. Pregnant women don't usually disappear unless something bad happens to them, so Charlie's disappearance was reported to the police. Charlie and Stephen Capobianco met in 2009. They stayed together for 2 years in Makawao on the beautiful Hawaiian island of Maui. However, while the red-headed Charlie was obsessed with her boyfriend, Stephen told his friends they were just roommates and avoided taking pictures with her. Their relationship was complicated, and no matter how harshly Stephen treated Charlie, she was prepared to completely forgive him. Some years before her disappearance, Charlie had broken up with Stephen, but she was still desperately in love with him. Stephen had found a new girlfriend but still maintained a secret relationship with Charlie, so they were intimate even after the breakup. When 27-year-old Charlie was trying to move on, she realized she was pregnant with Stephen's child. Her maternal instincts kicked in, and she was itching to be a mom. When she realized she was having a boy, she named him Joshua. However, 24-year-old Stephen was not very eager to become a father. They went to a family planning center together to discuss terminating the pregnancy. Stephen insisted that Charlie have an abortion, but in the end she opted not to do it and decided that she would raise the child on her own. He got really angry when he found out about it. Charlie didn't force Stephen to marry her. She was just happy about becoming a mother. The family supported Charlie's decision and were ready to give her all the help she needed. When Kimberlyn contacted the police to report her daughter's disappearance, she also told the investigators that Charlie was 5 months pregnant and that she had a strained relationship with the child's father, Stephen Capobianco. Charlie had an app installed on her phone that enabled the family to track her location. When Kimberlyn tried to do so, she found out that the last time Charlie's phone was active was Sunday night, February 9th. Charlie was in Haiku at her sister's house that day, and from there, she was supposed to go home to Makawao. However, she instead went in a completely different direction. She took the Hana Highway toward Nahiku, and the last time her phone was active, she was 30 miles away from home. Charlie had no reason to drive there, but Kimberlyn knew her daughter was ready to fulfill any request from Stephen. Kimberlyn told investigators that Stephen Capobianco might have some involvement in Charlie's disappearance when she filed a missing persons report. Unwilling to stay idle, Kimberlyn and Charlie's sister Phaedra got in their car the next morning and drove toward Nahiku on the Hana Highway. The Hana Highway is a very dangerous road with sharp turns, ascents, and descents, as well as one-way traffic sections. Nothing was found where Charlie's cell phone was last active. It was simply a stretch of road with no reason or place to stop. Kimberlyn and Phaedra would pick out convenient places to stop, get out of the car, and shout Charlie's name, suggesting that she might have gone off the road. They also called out for Charlie's dog, Nala, hoping she would appear from inside the woods. While Kimberlyn was searching for her daughter, the police headed to Stephen's house to speak to him, as he was the one Charlie's family had pointed to as the person who might be connected to the case. Stephen told detectives that he had indeed seen Charlie, but was not aware of her disappearance. He said his car broke down in a remote area of Maui, so he called Charlie and asked her to come and help him. The place where Stephen said his car broke down was about 3 miles from where Charlie's cell phone was last active. Stephen stated that Charlie assisted him in starting his car, whereupon they drove in the direction of Makawao. According to Stephen, he drove up front, and Charlie was behind him in case his car broke down again. At a certain point, he lost sight of Charlie's car in his rearview mirror, but he didn't think much of it at the time, assuming that he was driving too fast and Charlie had fallen far behind him. He went home and hasn't spoken to her since. The first disturbing discovery was made 2 days after the disappearance. Charlie's dog, Nala, was found in Nahiku, about 13 miles from where her cell phone was last active. After examining the dog, investigators concluded that Nala had been transported to Nahiku by someone. If she had traveled 13 miles over the rugged terrain on her own, there would have been marks and scuffs on her paws, but they were perfectly fine. Meanwhile, the police had expanded the search area, but the number of officers who could participate was limited. Therefore, Kimberlyn appealed to the people of Maui to help in the search for her daughter. Hundreds of volunteers responded to the request. Flyers with Charlie's picture were distributed all over the island, and detectives asked anyone with any information to come forward. The fact that Charlie was pregnant added to the urgency of the case. On April 12th, one of the volunteers made a discovery that shocked Charlie Scott's family. A car belonging to her was discovered completely burned out 10 miles from her home and very far from where her phone was last active. When the vehicle was discovered by volunteers, it was lying on its side. The only thing that reassured Charlie's family in this situation was that there were no remains in the car. This left hope that she was still alive. Maybe someone stole her car and then decided to burn it. While the police inspected the car, trying to find any clues, Charlie's family, with the help of volunteers, examined the place where her phone had last worked. The area was a stretch of terrain with thick and rugged vegetation, without footpaths or anything of the sort. Shortly before sunset, there was a discovery that suggested that Charlie was sadly no longer alive. There was a CD lying on the ground, which Phaedra identified as belonging to her sister, and next to it lay Charlie's t-shirt. Also, her shirt and skirt were found. It was clear that this was not a car accident, as Charlie's belongings were 20 miles away from where her burned-out car was found. The police were informed of this finding. From that point on, the investigation into her disappearance took a completely different turn. Stephen Capobianco was the last person to see Charlie alive, and when news spread around the island that her belongings had been found, Hawaii News Now's Maleka Lincoln contacted him by phone to see what he thought about it. Stephen accepted to answer questions and did a short interview in which he revealed a few details about his relationship with Charlie and how their last encounter went. Capobianco refused to have his voice recorded, so the interview was published as text. This interview will be voice-overed and presented as a phone conversation for your convenience. However, I repeat, this is a kind of reconstruction of the conversation, and it is not Stephen's voice that you will hear on the recording.
Hi, my name is Maleka Lincoln. I'm calling from Hawaii News Now. I'm calling to see if I can ask you some questions about the ongoing search for Charlie. I know that you've helped to participate in it, and I know there are questions about you being the last person to have seen her. I just wanted to see if we could clarify some things.
Go for it.
I'm going to record this if that's okay, and this is going to be for our coverage. Tell me how you know Charlie.
First off, I don't want my voice on the news.
You do not want the recording used?
Yeah, I do not want the recording used. I don't want my voice coming out on everyone's TV on this island.
I understand.
But I will answer all of your questions, and you guys can record it for your own personal use.
Okay.
So I knew Charlie because she was my ex-girlfriend from 3 or 4 years ago. 5 years ago, it was 5 years ago, and we have kept in touch this entire time. We were still friends. We still knew each other.
Are you the father of her unborn child? That's what we've been told.
That's what I've been told. I never got a piece of paper that said it or anything, but I would believe it.
So, were you guys dating again?
No, we just occasionally hooked up.
So tell me about what happened Sunday night.
Sunday night? She picked me up from my house at 8:30, drove out to my truck that I got stuck in Kiana, and she dropped me off at my truck. It took me about 10 minutes to fix my truck because I had extra light tools with me at that time. And then we came back to Haiku, and I'm pretty sure I saw her lights in my rear view the entire time. I'm absolutely certain I saw her headlights in my rearview mirror until I got to Twin Falls, and then I started speeding up because I drive a little faster than she does.
What made you speed up ahead of her?
I was in front of her in the first place, in case my truck broke down and she would pull up behind me.
Right, that makes sense. So it was around Twin Falls that you say that you stopped seeing her headlights?
Yeah.
And did you call her at any point afterwards just to make sure she'd gotten home?
I actually didn't think to do that until the next morning. I sent her a text that said, "Thank you," but I figured she was working. That's why she didn't get back to me right away. And it wasn't until the cops showed up at my house at 5:30 in the morning the next day that I realized something was wrong.
And so when the cops arrived, what did they tell you?
They told me that her parents had filed a missing persons report and gave them my name, and they came to my address just to follow the lead.
Have they officially questioned you? Sometimes they make people take a lie detector test.
I volunteered for all of that. I went down there as soon as I could. I let them interrogate me. I let them polygraph me. I did everything.
How'd the polygraph go?
To the best of my knowledge, it went okay.
Did you pass? Fail?
The police told me I failed. They didn't make me take it again. I'm honestly not convinced I failed. I think they might have just said that as a tactic, but I really don't know I'm walking around right now without handcuffs on.
So what do police tell you?
They've just been questioning me. They haven't really told me anything. I mean, it's undeniable that I'm probably the prime suspect, so they're not going to tell me any details.
Was the dog Nala with Charlie when she came to pick you up?
Yeah.
So does it make sense to you how Nala was found?
No.
But Nala was still in the car with Charlie when you guys left Keani?
Yep.
What do you think about the fact that the car was found torched and on its side?
I'm not really sure what to think about that yet.
What is it that you want? And I understand that you don't want your voice to be used. But in terms of what you're sharing and telling us, what is it that you want viewers to know?
I mean, I don't really care what they know. I just want Charlie to be found.
Did you do anything to hurt Charlie?
Absolutely not.
Do you understand why people think you might have?
Of course.
So what's next for you? What is your next step?
I've been doing everything I can to try help her, but her family is getting hostile with me, so I'm sitting here at my house just waiting for any news to come through.
Are you worried about your safety at all?
A little bit, but that's of little consequence because Charlie's safety is first and foremost.
Steven, do you think they'll find her?
I don't know. I f***ing hope so.
Did you love her?
Of course.
Were you excited about being a dad?
Sort of. It was unexpected. She didn't tell me right away, but it was growing on me.
Yeah, I guess you had more time, huh?
Yeah. I mean, last time we talked, we were talking about naming it. I thought we were getting there.
Was that on Sunday?
Yeah, that was on the ride out there.
Do you know if you were having a boy or girl?
I don't know for certain, but I was really hopeful that it was a boy. What man doesn't want a son?
Do you know what she was hoping for?
She was probably hoping for a girl. What woman doesn't want a daughter?
So you literally just sit and wait. The cops didn't call you after Charlie's car was found?
I had a friend who notified me, but the cops never did.
Is it true that you live nearby?
Yeah.
You think that someone might be trying to set you up?
I never really considered it until you said something, but maybe.
I mean, if you didn't do anything, right?
I definitely did not do anything.
It would sure seem like it then.
Yeah.
You have any enemies?
Her family.
Just her family?
They're the only people I can think of that would not like me enough to do anything about it. Everybody else on the island seems to love me.
So did you never have a good relationship with them? Or did you used to have a good relationship when you guys were dating?
No, I mean, me and Charlie always had a pretty good relationship, but not me and her family.
Was the family excited about Charlie being pregnant?
I believe so. I had never talked to them about it. I had never had any contact with her family since I stopped dating her, up until they wanted me to come help them, Monday morning when they showed up.
Monday morning they showed up?
They showed up. One of them showed up at work and told me what was going on and then called me later, and I rushed out to show them exactly what had happened the night before and proceeded to help them look.
What do you think might have happened to Charlie? Do you think there's a chance she just got tired of life on Maui and left?
I don't think so. Not under these circumstances. She was a very caring person and she loved her dogs. And to have one of her dogs show up in Nahiku and one of her dogs had been locked in her house for a whole day, she wouldn't do that. Above all else, she would not leave her dogs unattended.
Do you think Charlie may have had any enemies?
That's hard for me to say. I didn't hang out with her very often, but I mean, she had kind of a mouth on her. I could see her pissing somebody off. But again, I don't want to speculate. I don't know for certain.
I understand.
Her family might be able to better answer that one.
That is a good question for them. You're right. What's next for you, Steven?
I don't know. I'm going to do everything I can to help.
Are you still participating in the searches?
In my own way, but as I said, the family's getting kind of hostile, so I stopped joining the search party myself. I've sort of ventured out on my own.
Thus, Stephen realized that he was the prime suspect in this case. He was the last person to see Charlie alive, and he didn't want to be a father. Yet, could Stephen's reluctance to become a father have been enough of a motive for the crime? When Charlie's family looked closely at her skirt, they were left in no doubt that Stephen Capobianco was responsible for her disappearance. Her skirt had a large number of cuts on it, especially in the stomach area, which led the detectives to draw some very definite conclusions. The search became focused on the area where Charlie's belongings were found. The police and her family realized that they probably wouldn't find her alive, but the reality was much more shocking. One police officer discovered a jawbone, and then other smaller fragments were found. The next morning, a team of investigators set out to search for Charlie's remains, and they soon made several more discoveries. These included a tongue-piercing pin, several pieces of long red hair, and fingernails. 9 days after Charlie's disappearance, it was confirmed that the jawbone found, as well as the hair and fingernails, were hers. Charlie was officially pronounced dead, and this came as a heavy blow to her family, who mourned not only Charlie herself, but also her child. The forensic team analyzed the jawbone they found. Over a dozen cuts were found on it, leading them to conclude that whoever took Charlie's life intended to dispose of her body piece by piece. The police and her family continued to search for months, but they didn't find anything else. The cause of Charlie Scott's death was impossible to determine, but the unchanging fact remained that Stephen Capobianco was the only suspect. When interviewed by the detectives, he made it clear that he did not intend to become a father and also claimed that he had nothing to do with the death of his ex-girlfriend. Charlie's skirt had 27 slits on it, with their location concentrated in one spot, which investigators believed was no coincidence. However, a single motive was not enough for an arrest, so the police focused their attention on Charlie and Stephen's phone records. It turned out that hours before Kimberlyn reported her daughter's disappearance to the police, Stephen had been in the area where Charlie's remains were later found. His and Charlie's cell phones were near each other, but then Charlie's phone was turned off and was never retrieved. Phone records also showed that Stephen had returned to the area where the remains were found at least 3 times. This evidence indicated that Capobianco had made a false statement when he told the police that he returned home after Charlie had helped him with his car. Detectives speculated that he burned Charlie's car to get rid of evidence of the crime. Stephen Capobianco was arrested 5 months after Charlie's disappearance. He was charged with taking Charlie's life, specifically the second degree of that offense, as well as second-degree arson. He pleaded not guilty to both of the charges against him. There is no law in Hawaii that punishes the death of an unborn child, so Stephen was not charged with anything related to that. It took more than 2 years before Capobianco went to trial. The challenge for the prosecution was that there was only circumstantial evidence. However, the prosecution introduced new DNA evidence a few days before the trial began. During the course of the investigation, jeans with distinctive dark red stains were found. DNA testing confirmed that these stains were Charlie Scott's blood. The jeans were consistent with the size worn by Stephen Capobianco, but that's not all. A short black hair was also found in the pocket, and DNA analysis confirmed that it belonged to Stephen. This directly linked him to Charlie's death. However, it turned out that this evidence was submitted past the deadline, and the judge decided that Stephen's jeans and hair could not be used as evidence at trial. Thus, the judge dismissed the only irrefutable piece of evidence, and now Stephen's chances of getting away with his wrongdoings have greatly increased. The trial dragged on for 6 months. Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Robert Rivera told jurors during the trial that multiple stab wounds in the abdomen area of Charlie Scott's skirt showed that Capobianco made her suffer. Charlie's father, Robert Scott, stated at a court hearing that even though he attempted to free himself from anger and revenge, he was unsuccessful. "Turns out it's an innate human characteristic in me," he said. "It's very strong. If the courts, the justice system doesn't provide this, who will? If this retribution is not satisfied, I will do it myself. After saying that some things have crossed the line, Robert Scott poked defense attorney John Appo in the face with his finger. "You should be ashamed of yourself, and I spit on you," Scott said. The judge then asked sheriff's deputies to remove Robert Scott from the courtroom, saying, "This is inappropriate." On December 28, 2016, a jury found 27-year-old Stephen Capobianco guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 40 years for taking Charlie Scott's life. He received another 10 years for setting her car on fire. Since the court sentenced Capobianco to consecutive sentences, his minimum term is 50 years before he is eligible for parole. Capobianco didn't testify during his trial. After the sentencing, Kimberlin said she considered the prison time pretty much the best Hawaii could offer. She said it does not compensate her family for the loss of her daughter, as well as her unborn child Joshua, but it does provide some peace of mind. "I think we are glad we've gotten this decision," she said. "I am not totally unhappy. I would like life to mean actually life. But here in our state, life sentences are basically 20 years, so getting 40 years is a small way of acknowledging the lives he took away." Another problem Charlie's parents faced was that the fragments found were not legally considered a body and were held as evidence in the case, so the family could not take them away and give them a proper burial. 6 years after their daughter's death in 2020, Kimberlin and Robert saw the remains for the first time after a public memorial outside the Maui Police Department's Forensic Center, where they are kept as physical evidence. The emotional tribute outside the forensic building included flowers, photos, and an ultrasound image of her unborn son. After the public ceremony, her parents were allowed to privately view her partial remains, which include her jawbone. Robert and Kimberlin said they will pursue a change in the law and will keep looking for ways to give their daughter a proper burial. In this video, we'll discuss the events that occurred in Costa Rica. 47-year-old Maria Luisa Cedeno was found unresponsive in a hotel room. The mysterious death of the woman turned into a large-scale investigation. Maria Luisa's body had bite marks left by several different people. The hotel staff did not hear anything. Only the woman's dog was barking, giving reason to believe something was wrong. Maria Luisa was born on May 29, 1977, in La Fortuna de San Carlos, Costa Rica. She was the youngest of 5 children in her family. She graduated from high school in 1994. Maria Luisa was a diligent student who dreamed of becoming the first member of her family to receive a university diploma. Determined to succeed in life, she decided to study medicine. Maria Luisa graduated from the medical faculty at the University in San Jose. She received master's degrees in anesthesiology and rehabilitation and surgical medicine. Maria Luisa worked as an anesthesiologist and was a well-known specialist in this field of medicine. Many people who devote their lives to building a successful career do not have time for a personal life. Maria Luisa was one of those people. She dated a doctor she met while studying at university. However, their relationship did not last long. In February 2020, they broke up, and this caused her depression. The restrictions imposed everywhere due to the virus spreading around the globe further aggravated the situation. Maria Luisa wanted to take a little break from all the problems and decided to spend the weekend in some quiet place on the coast. She booked a room at La Mansion Inn in Quepos, Punta Arenas. Her room was on the ground floor and had 2 entrances. One entrance was from the hotel's lobby, and the second allowed access to the courtyard. Maria Luisa chose this room because she was with her beloved dog. She checked into the room on Saturday, July 18, 2020, and was supposed to leave the hotel on Monday, July 20th. Everything went as the woman planned. She checked in at her hotel room on July 18th. The next day, she had a good time on the beach with her dog. Then, she walked through the local streets and took photos, which she shared with her loved ones. In the evening, Maria Luisa ordered a bottle of wine, 2 glasses, and water to her room. On Monday, July 20th, she had to have breakfast and go to San Jose for work. Yet, she didn't come to breakfast scheduled for 8 a.m. The hotel staff thought she had just decided to sleep in, and therefore did not bother her. But when a few more hours passed and Maria Luisa still didn't appear, the staff became worried. At about 12 p.m., the maid started knocking on the door, but the woman did not open it. Her dog was barking inside, and it was very alarming. After all, the dog's incessant barking would have woken the woman up. As mentioned earlier, the room where Maria Luisa stayed had 2 entrances. The maids went to the entrance from the courtyard. They kept calling out the woman's name, but all they could hear was the restless barking of the dog. Since no one locked the door, they decided to go inside. Upon entering, they saw bloodstains and Maria Luisa's body wrapped in sheets on the bed. One of the maids called the emergency services and asked for an ambulance and the police. Unfortunately, it was impossible to save the woman, as she died a few hours before that call. This case seemed strange even at the initial stage of the investigation. After all, the hotel was almost empty due to the virus spreading around the globe. Nevertheless, there was always someone from the staff there, but none of them saw or heard anything. The door to Maria Luisa's room had an electronic lock. The security could check every use of the key in their database. It was possible to find out who entered the room and at what time. When the police checked the database, they found that no one except the woman had entered it. The staff had a duplicate key, but no one used it on the night of the crime. But as I said, Maria Luisa's room had 2 entrances. The second entrance to the room was a sliding glass door, and you didn't need an electronic key to open it. Thus, the investigators assumed the perpetrator entered the room through this door. Another version was that Maria Luisa let the criminal inside. The police almost immediately ruled out the possibility that the motive for the crime was theft. The valuables, jewelry, and money in the room remained untouched. It meant the criminal had other goals. When the criminologists examined Maria Luisa's body, they realized what the criminal wanted to get. The woman was naked, and she was fighting for her life. Traces of the criminal's DNA remained under her fingernails. There were bite marks on her face and chest, finger marks on her ankle, bruises from heavy blows on her face, and traces of strangulation on her neck. The reports also say there were injuries in her genital area and seminal fluid. The police saw distinct footprints on the floor next to the bed. The woman's phone was lying next to her, and there were 2 glasses, an open bottle of wine, and water on the table. Forensic experts named head and neck injuries as the cause of death. Experts believed they would get DNA samples from the bites on Maria Luisa's body. However, the results of the examination surprised even the most experienced people. The bites on the woman's chest and cheek contained her saliva, but a person cannot bite their own cheek. It meant that the perpetrator had contaminated the bites on the woman's body with her saliva to mask their DNA. Another oddity was that the perpetrator washed Maria Luisa's dead body before wrapping it in a sheet and putting it on the bed. Perhaps this is how the person who took the woman's life wanted to destroy the evidence left on the body. To some extent, this person succeeded. Maria Luisa's death was an unimaginable challenge for her family, especially for her parents, who were over 80. It wasn't just death. The torture that Maria Luisa went through before her death made her family's grief even more painful. None of the friends, colleagues, and relatives could believe this kind, cheerful, and sympathetic soul was no longer with them. News of the brutal crime that resulted in the death of a well-known anesthesiologist spread quickly across Costa Rica. Therefore, the police wanted to find the person responsible for the death of Maria Luisa as soon as possible. The police started the investigation by checking everyone who worked and lived at the hotel during the same time as Maria Luisa. Although there were CCTV cameras at the hotel, the police couldn't obtain recordings as these cameras weren't working. The hotel was practically empty due to the situation in the world. The lack of customers also affected the number of staff. Maria Luisa wrote to one of her friends that the same person who served the coffee also performed other duties at the hotel. Despite all this, she noted that she was having a great time there. The owner of the hotel was a Dutch businessman, Harry Bodaan. The man was born in The Hague in 1951. In the 1970s, he moved to the United States and started working at Hilton. At some point, he rose to the position of hotel manager. Bodaan became director of the National Press Club in Washington in the early 1980s. Officially, it's a journalists' club, but it's also a place where politicians and presidents from all over the world meet with each other and journalists. Over time, Bodaan gained connections and bought real estate in many countries. One of his possessions was a hotel in Costa Rica, where he lived with his young husband, Yader Danilo Obando. Another guest of the hotel was 38-year-old Teodoro Herrera Martinez. He was in a close relationship with the hotel's owner, Harry Bodaan, and according to the latter, they met in one of the bars where Martinez worked as a stripper. About a year later, Bodaan invited him to work at his hotel, but later fired him due to a lack of customers. However, he allowed Martinez to live in one of the rooms for free. The two men had friendly relations. Martinez periodically carried out personal assignments for Bodaan and some work related to hotel maintenance. Teodoro Martinez became the first suspect after an official police dog led investigators to the door of his room. There were scratches on his back and cheeks, which were probably left by Maria Luisa Cedeno when she was fighting for her life. The police found traces of blood on his shoes, which indicated his involvement in this crime. They arrested Martinez on the first day after the crime and sent him to prison for 6 months. During this time, the authorities had to complete the investigation, establish all the details of this crime, and take the case to court. 5 days after Maria Luisa's death, police arrested a second suspect. It turned out to be 36-year-old Luis Carlos Miranda. The man, just like Teodoro Martinez, was a close friend of Harry Bodaan. When the latter's business was going well, Miranda served as his public relations specialist. He also lived in a hotel but had problems with work. At first, the police did not disclose details of what evidence allowed them to arrest Miranda. However, it soon became known that experts believed Miranda left one of the bites on the victim's body. He, like Martinez, was imprisoned for 6 months. At the beginning of the investigation, the police assumed that Maria Luisa might have invited someone to her room. They made this conclusion based on the fact that the woman ordered 2 glasses to her room. But after interviewing her family and friends, investigators learned that Maria Luisa often took 2 glasses when she drank wine. She used the second one for water. A month after Maria Luisa's death, the police arrested the hotel's owner, Harry Bodaan. One of the bites on the woman's body matched his dental cast, and investigators believed that Bodaan was one of 3 people involved in the crime. All 3 arrested, of course, denied any involvement in the death of the well-known anesthesiologist. While Miranda and Martinez received 6 months in prison, Harry Bodaan was under house arrest due to his health problems. Reports say he had Parkinson's disease and was battling cancer. The police questioned Bodaan's husband, Yader Danilo Obando. He denied that Harry could have been involved in Maria Luisa's death, describing in detail the day and night when the crime occurred. That day, as usual, he got up early to help Bodaan bathe and get dressed. Then, Obando went to sleep. At 12 p.m., he woke up, ate something, and went to his office on the hotel territory. At that time, his job was to create a website to improve hotel attendance under government restrictions. He spent the day at work, and in the evening, he drank rum with Martinez and Miranda by the pool. According to Obando, he and Bodaan were asleep when the latter's phone rang at about 1 a.m. Bodaan answered the call. A hotel security guard called Bodaan to inform him that Martinez had stolen some beer from the hotel bar and was wandering the corridors. Obando helped Bodaan get up, and they went to find Martinez. They found him in shorts and shirtless, with a beer in his hand. Bodaan took the beer from his hands and threw it on the floor. He told Martinez to go to bed and think about where he would live next, saying he did not want to see him in his hotel anymore. After that, according to Obando, he and Bodaan went to their room. It was the night of the crime. It was strange that none of those who lived and worked at the hotel heard anything, considering that Maria Luisa was severely injured and fought for her life. The authorities believed Yader Danilo Obando was involved in this crime too, but found no evidence to prove it. As already mentioned, Harry Baudin was under house arrest. He had an ankle monitor and was forbidden to leave the hotel and contact other suspects. At the end of 2021, Baudin sold his hotel. His health was deteriorating, and he needed to pay for the services of a lawyer. The new hotel owners did not allow him to stay there, and he had to move. He gave the prosecutor's office his new address, but they marked him as a suspect who could flee the country. Therefore, they lifted his house arrest and placed him in the prison hospital in March 2022. He did not like the care provided there. He called it substandard, claiming human rights violations. The trial started in September 2022. There were more details of the case after each new court session. The prosecutor's office believed Teodoro Martinez was the main culprit. He had scratches on his body, and his DNA was under Maria Luisa's fingernails. In addition, the traces of seminal fluid found at the crime scene also belonged to Martinez. Due to the great deal of people willing to attend the trial and the large number of journalists who covered the case, they postponed the trial several times. The courtroom could not accommodate this many people. Harry Baudin appeared in court in a wheelchair, accompanied by his lawyer, who filed a petition to have his client transferred to house arrest due to health problems. However, the court denied this request. The prosecutor's office presented its version of what happened. They believed that on the night of July 19th to July 20th, 2020, 3 suspects entered Maria Luisa's room and attacked her. They entered through a sliding glass door, knowing no one would see it in the database. Moreover, there were almost no people in the hotel. Based on the fact that no one heard the woman's screams, prosecutors concluded that she was asleep when the 3 of them attacked her. They probably covered her mouth with something so no one would hear anything. Harry Baudin and Miranda left their teeth prints on her body. Presumably, these 2 held Maria Luisa while Martinez brought his sadistic fantasies to life. The exhausted woman fought for her life, but the forces were unequal. They beat her severely and then strangled her, eventually breaking her cervical vertebrae. All 3 men knew they had enough time to cover their tracks. They washed her body, moved it to the bed, and covered it with a sheet. They smeared the bite marks on Maria Luisa's body with her saliva so that experts could not find foreign DNA there. However, each defendant's lawyer had a different strategy. Baudin's defense argued that their client underwent knee surgery shortly before Maria Luisa's death and had difficulty walking, let alone participating in the crime. They postponed the trial again because the expert witness who was supposed to testify about the teeth marks on the victim's body had left the country. Miranda's lawyer invited a Spanish orthodontist from Madrid. The woman said the teeth marks on the skin weren't sufficient evidence. Her testimony was supposed to last 2 days, but she returned to Spain a day later because she felt intimidated by the prosecutor's office. The latter questioned her competence and wanted to bring her to justice because she was not accredited by a professional association in Costa Rica and therefore illegally posed as an expert. According to the conclusions reached by the Ministry of Justice and Peace, the crime could not have been committed by only one person. Hence, they insisted that all 3 men were involved in the case. Miranda's defense questioned the theory that more than one person was involved in the crime. The lawyers criticized the shortcomings of the examination conducted by the judicial authorities and pointed to inconsistencies that should have been the basis for Miranda's acquittal. During one of the trials, the court heard the statement from the lead investigator who handled the case. He said it took them more than 5 hours to inspect the crime scene thoroughly. They realized that the criminals washed Maria Luisa's body before moving it to the bed by applying luminol in the bathroom. Since there were no marks on the floor of the hotel room, but there were finger marks on the victim's ankles, experts believed that at least 2 people carried Maria Luisa's body onto the bed. As for Teodoro Martinez, there was more irrefutable evidence against him. During the trial, everyone learned that Maria Luisa's blood was on the inside and outside of his shoes. It could mean he was barefoot at the time of the crime and stained his feet with blood before putting on his shoes. They also found blood on his phone and watch. Moreover, his DNA, including seminal fluid, was on the victim's body. Therefore, unlike the other two defendants, Martinez could not claim he was not involved in the crime. Based on all this, Martinez admitted there was intimate contact between them, but he denied he had done everything else. During the investigation, it became known that Harry Baudin had knee surgery at the same clinic where Maria Luisa worked. But she wasn't the only anesthesiologist at the clinic, and there was no evidence that she and Baudin had ever met. During the testimony, the man also denied he knew Maria Luisa. According to him, he found out that she was staying at his hotel only after he received a call about a dead woman in one of the rooms. During one of the interrogations, they asked Baudin why the security cameras were not working in his hotel. There were cameras, but they didn't work because of funding problems. We had about 5 or 6 low-quality cameras, and gradually, they all broke down, Baudin explained. He also said there were problems with the electricity in the hotel, but the maintenance staff dealt with these problems. There was no evidence other than bite marks on the victim's body to prove Harry Baudin and Luis Carlos Miranda's involvement in the crime. Therefore, in the end, it all came down to whether dental prints can be considered irrefutable evidence. While hearing Miranda's case, the judge made several clarifications, including pointing out that dental evidence, that is, the match of the teeth pattern with bite marks on the victim's body, could not be considered because no one read the accused man his rights before taking a sample. Although there was some evidence against Baudin, the judge pointed out that it was impossible to determine whether his dental cast matched the bite mark. Forensic experts said the analysis of the teeth allowed them to exclude everyone who was in the hotel on the night of Maria Luisa's death, except Miranda and Baudin. But at the same time, there was a possibility that someone else had left the marks on the victim's body. It meant that the evidence was not convincing to the judge. In April 2023, the court found Teodoro Martinez guilty of taking Maria Luisa Cedeno's life, sentencing him to 50 years in prison. The court also acquitted Harry Baudin and Luis Carlos Miranda due to doubts about their guilt. However, the story did not end there. In October 2023, the Costa Rican Court of Appeal ruled to review the case against Baudin and his 2 co-defendants with new judges. As evidence, the Costa Rican prosecutor's office used the alleged teeth marks of Baudin and Miranda on the victim's body. The prosecutor's office wanted to try to convince other judges of the authenticity of the teeth marks as evidence. The decision of the Court of Appeal did not come as a surprise to Baudin. Given how the investigation by the prosecutor's office has failed and how many inconsistencies this case has, I am not surprised, he said. He also accused the female prosecutor of bias, saying that she was abusing this case to advance her career. Baudin, who had already left Costa Rica, now lives in the Netherlands. Even if the court in Costa Rica decides to detain him, he has nothing to fear because there is no extradition treaty between the 2 countries, and he's not going back to Costa Rica. Here is what he said in an interview with Dutch journalists. Given my terrible experience with the Costa Rican legal system, and the fact that I paid a high price in the form of almost 3 years in prison, it is not in my interest to go back. There are too many policies there guided by public opinion. The country has an outdated legal system, there is corruption, and its mass media is at the level of a banana republic. I can't take any more risks at my age and with my illnesses. Thus, this case has not yet come to an end. This story happened in 2002 in Kansas, U.S. 19-year-old Alexandra Kemp, or Allie as everyone called her, worked at an outdoor swimming pool during the summer vacation. Her brother also worked there, but they had different shifts. One day when he came to work, he could not find his sister, so he called his father. The guy couldn't even imagine that Allie was closer than he thought. Alexandra Elizabeth Kemp was born on October 11, 1982, in Leawood, located on the border of Kansas and Missouri. She was the eldest of 3 children and the only daughter of her parents. Alexandra graduated from high school with honors and enrolled at the Kansas State University. She had big life plans, including going on a trip. In 2002, having finished her first year of university, she returned to Leawood for the summer vacation. There was an outdoor swimming pool not far from her parents' house. Her younger brother Tyler worked there. Alexandra also decided to earn some money during the summer and got a part-time job there. It wasn't a busy place. The pool was mainly for the people who lived in the neighborhood. By the way, this pool is still functioning to this day. On June 18, 2002, Alexandra was at work. It was a cloudy day, so there were fewer visitors than usual. At about 5 p.m., Tyler came to the pool to start his shift, but his sister wasn't there. Her mobile phone and purse were on the table where she usually sat. Confused, Tyler called his parents and said that Alexandra disappeared. Their father, Roger Kemp, immediately arrived at the scene. The first thing he did was look into the pool. Roger exhaled with relief. The pool was empty. Then Roger went to a small pump room by the pool that contained various items used for water purification, a ladder, and other things. Once inside, the man looked around but did not see anything suspicious. But then he noticed a leg sticking out from under the tarp. Running up and lifting the tarp, Roger saw his brutally beaten daughter. She was naked from the waist down and had many bruises on her face and body. The man immediately called 911. Talking to the operator, he cried and begged Alexandra not to leave him. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was performing CPR on his daughter. They took the girl to the hospital, but unfortunately, despite all their efforts, Alexandra did not survive. She was pronounced dead right after arriving at the hospital. Despite many severe injuries, the cause of Alexandra's death was strangulation. Although her body was partially naked, experts found no signs of someone forcing her into intimacy before her death. While waiting for the results of an analysis of the DNA samples taken from Alexandra's body, the police cordoned off the pool, searching for clues that would help identify the perpetrator. There were clear signs of a struggle in the room where Roger found Alexandra's body. Her flip-flops were in 2 different places. The police also found an open antiseptic gel and a cap from it. A few days later, while the police were desperately trying to find the perpetrator, the family and hundreds of caring people said goodbye to Alexandra at a funeral ceremony. The first person suspected was Phil Howes, whom Alexandra had been dating since high school. Phil also worked as a pool administrator. On the day of Alexandra's death, he was working the morning shift, and Alexandra came at noon. Her shift was supposed to last 5 hours. Sometimes, Phil stayed after work to spend extra time with his girlfriend, Alexandra. But this time, he left right after his shift because they had planned a date for the evening. As mentioned earlier, when Alexandra's brother came to work, she was already under a tarp in the pump room. However, Phil had a solid alibi, and the police quickly excluded him from the suspect list. Talking to detectives, he said that Alexandra did not like being alone, as lawnmowers often stared at her and tried to flirt with her. The police interrogated the lawnmowers, but all the men had an alibi. However, it wasn't a complete dead end. Several men said they had seen a strange man sitting in the bushes with a video camera, presumably watching the girls in swimsuits. They saw this man by the pool the day before Alexandra's death. Moreover, someone said that he left in an old Ford pickup truck. Studying the activity of the girl's mobile phone, experts found that she communicated with a friend named Laurel on the day of her death. They even agreed to meet. Laurel appeared at the police station for questioning. She told investigators that Alexandra asked her to come and sit with her until her shift ended. The weather that day wasn't that good, so no one visited the pool, which made Alexandra uncomfortable. According to Laurel, she arrived at the pool at about 2:30 p.m. and parked a couple of yards from the fence, but Alexandra wasn't there. Laurel started honking, hoping Alexandra would come out to the sound. But instead of her friend, she saw a man coming out of the pool house. The latter looked at her and waved with a smile. Laurel didn't know this man. She assumed it was Alexandra's boss and decided to leave so as not to create unnecessary problems for her friend. At that moment, she thought Alexandra would be in trouble if the boss found out that she was talking to friends during working hours. But that man wasn't Alexandra's boss or coworker. The police were almost sure that Laurel had seen the criminal. Following Laurel's description, a forensic artist sketched the suspect. The police were looking for a white man, about 30 years old, of stocky build with short brown hair, and driving a Ford pickup truck, presumably of 1980. The authorities received a lot of clues. One person said the man named James Strader looked very similar to the sketch of the suspect. Strader had an old Ford pickup truck and worked as a mechanic about 20 minutes from the pool. When the police found the man and took him to the station, they were shocked by his resemblance to the sketch compiled from Laurel's description. James denied any involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death. The man's employer confirmed his alibi, saying James was at work on the day of Alexandra's death. As a result, they let Strader go. Meanwhile, the police received a report from the laboratory. They discovered male DNA on a tube of antiseptic gel found at the crime scene and on Alexandra's body. However, it wasn't of much help because the police found no matches when checking these samples in the databases. Alexandra's friends, family members, and boyfriend were officially excluded from the list of suspects since their DNA did not match the DNA samples found on her body. The driving force in this investigation was Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp. Losing his beloved daughter deprived him of the meaning of life, but he regained it, setting himself the goal of finding the one who took Alexandra's life. In an interview, Roger said, "You have two options. You can stay in bed and pull the blanket over your head or go out and fight. I chose to fight." The police department was so impressed with Roger's perseverance and tenacity that he got his own place at the police station, where he collected all the information he received and shared possible leads with the investigation. After checking all the clues available at that time, Roger, together with the investigators, contacted the producers of the television program America's Most Wanted and asked to make an episode about the death of Alexandra. The creators agreed. At one point, it was the longest-running program on television and consisted of 24 seasons. After Alexandra's story aired, the police started receiving hundreds of calls with information. They checked all the clues, none of which led to a breakthrough. The investigation again reached a dead end. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra's death, there was a new, as it seemed, solid clue. As a result of the search activities, the police arrested a man in Utah. They received 3 statements about this person. With a difference of several days, 2 women and one 14-year-old girl, unrelated to each other, reported to the police that some man forced them into intimacy. The criminal went on the run, but was tracked down and arrested in Utah. This man turned out to be James Strader, the same man whom the Kansas police interrogated earlier. Strader had very similar facial features to the sketch of the suspect. For some reason, no one took his DNA sample at that time. Perhaps no one did this because his boss convinced the police that Strader was at work on the day of the crime and did not leave anywhere. Now everyone thought the Alexandra Kemp case was about to be solved, but Strader again denied his involvement in her death. He agreed that he looked very similar to the suspect's portrait but claimed he had not been by the pool that day. He provided a DNA sample for the analysis. However, the results frustrated everyone. His DNA did not match the DNA found on Alexandra's body and the antiseptic gel tube. In the end, Strader went to prison for unrelated charges, and the investigation of the Alexandra Kemp case again reached a stalemate. A year has passed since Alexandra's death, but the police had no suspects. Roger Kemp and Phil Howes, the guy Alexandra was dating, continued their fight for justice. Phil, the president of the student community, used email to distribute the portrait of the suspect among students of other universities. He also asked the student communities of other educational institutions to watch America's Most Wanted episode about Alexandra Kemp, but all the efforts made by her relatives and the police did not give results. Another year has passed. Roger Kemp did not give up and continued his struggle for justice for his daughter. He contacted the America's Most Wanted program again and asked to rerun the episode about Alexandra's death. The creators asked Roger if there was any new information in the case, to which he replied, "No." Such determination of a father who lost his daughter impressed the show's creators. Therefore, the episode was shown again. After that, the police again received a large number of calls. Roger offered a $25,000 reward for any information helpful to identify the one who took Alexandra's life. The authorities of the city of Leawood increased it to $50,000. Roger also posted an image of his daughter, the suspect's sketch, and information about the reward in newspapers. One day, he was driving along the highway and noticed the billboards. At that moment, Roger realized that a billboard was a great way to attract attention. He began calling advertising agencies and asking how much it would cost to place the needed information on one of the billboards. One of the agencies that Roger called was Lamar Advertising Company. When the company's owner learned that Roger Kemp wanted to rent a billboard, he refused to take money from him. Instead, he told him that he could post information for free, and not on one but several billboards. Roger decided to post a sketch of the suspect and information about the reward on billboards located next to one of the busiest highways in the state. The police again received hundreds of clues, which took time to check. At the same time, some clues were about the same man. Two unrelated people reported about Teddy Hoover, the owner of an old Ford pickup truck. The man worked in pool maintenance and looked similar to the suspect's sketch. So many matches could not be just a coincidence, so the police started the search for a man named Teddy Hoover. They found out the address of his residence in Kansas and immediately went there. Hoover opened the door. He was surprised and visibly nervous, but this did not indicate his fault. Many people get nervous when the police knock on their doors. They asked him about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002. As one could expect, the man replied that he did not remember because 2 years had passed since then. Not many people will remember where they were on a particular day a few years ago. Hoover also denied being involved in the maintenance of the pool Alexandra worked at. Still, the detectives asked him to voluntarily give a sample of his DNA to exclude him from the list of suspects. Hoover replied he needed to contact a lawyer before doing this. He said he would call the police himself after talking with a lawyer. About a day later, Hoover's lawyer contacted investigators and said his client was worried about his sample ending up in the database. Allegedly, Teddy believed in various conspiracy theories. In other words, he thought the police would use it against him in other cases. The investigators promised that they would not enter Hoover's DNA into any database and would only check if it matched the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer said he would talk to his client and call back. While waiting for the call, the police looked through all the materials for the 100th time and found a piece of paper with a familiar name in one of the folders. On the day Alexandra died, detectives interviewed onlookers gathered by the pool, hoping to learn if they had seen anything suspicious. One of the people the police talked to by the pool was none other than Ted Hoover. It meant he was at the crime scene, although he told detectives he had never been there. With every passing minute, the police were more confident that Ted Hoover could be the man they had been searching for 2 years. After several days of waiting, the investigators contacted Hoover's lawyer and asked if his client was ready to provide a sample of his DNA. The lawyer's response came as a surprise to the investigators. The man said his client refused his services and stopped contacting him. Police immediately went to Hoover's house, but by this time, their main suspect managed to escape. They put the 29-year-old man on the national wanted list. However, he managed to cover his tracks quite successfully. Billboards with the suspect's image were still in place, and detectives had been searching for Hoover for months without success. In September 2004, a man called the police and said he had information about the suspect. He said he knew the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom he lived in Kansas. Detectives decided to find this woman but discovered that she left the state at the same time when Hoover escaped. The woman's name was Laura Barr, and the U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that she was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut. A man named Benjamin Appleby also received mail at the same address. The house where they lived was in a secluded rural area. The police were sure that Benjamin Appleby was either a pseudonym or the real name of Teddy Hoover. Leawood detectives contacted the Connecticut State Police and asked them to help find Appleby. As it turned out, in 1997, the man had problems with the law in Connecticut, which resulted in a warrant for his arrest. The man exposed himself in front of a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin fled the state, and the police could not find him. Now, with an arrest warrant, the detectives went to the address where the mail came for Benjamin Appleby. They found the man at home and immediately arrested him. As the Kansas detectives suspected, Benjamin Appleby and Teddy Hoover were the same person. When Appleby got into trouble with the law in Connecticut in 1997, he fled the state and lived under the pseudonym Teddy Hoover. But when detectives in Kansas wanted to get a sample of his DNA to check his involvement in the death of Alexandra Kemp, he returned to Connecticut, started living under his real name, and tried to keep a low profile, assuming that everyone had forgotten about his wrongdoings. Appleby refused extradition to Kansas, so the Leawood detectives went to Connecticut. Assuming that he would again declare his innocence, the detectives tricked him. Before bringing the man into the interrogation room, they hung up crime scene photos and Alexandra and Appleby's pictures and put folders on the table with his name written on them. The police did everything to give him the impression that the investigation knew everything about him. When the man appeared in the interrogation room, he was speechless. One of the detectives asked, "What do you think will happen when we get a sample of your DNA?" A moment later, Appleby started crying and said that Alexandra's death was his doing. He described the events of that cloudy June day. Benjamin saw Alexandra and she seemed attractive. He decided to hit on her, and when she went into the pump room, he went after her and locked the door so she couldn't get out. When Appleby touched the girl, she hit him back. Feeling humiliated, he began to beat and strangle her. Alexandra lost consciousness, and Appleby decided to satisfy his lust and partially undressed her. He took a tube of antiseptic gel from the first aid kit and was going to use it as a lubricant. Alexandra's friend, the one sitting in the car behind the fence and beeping, prevented him from carrying out his plan. He was afraid to get caught red-handed, so he covered the body and left the room. When he saw Alexandra's friend, he smiled and waved to her. Next, he got into his pickup truck and drove away. A few hours later, he returned to the crime scene and stood in a crowd of onlookers gathered by the pool. The DNA analysis left no doubt. The DNA found on the tube with gel and Alexandra's body belonged to Benjamin Appleby. Thus, after more than 2 years, and largely thanks to the efforts of Roger Kemp, the police found the man who took Alexandra's life. Appleby told investigators he was ready to fully admit guilt to quickly close this case and prevent Alexandra's family from going through an emotional ordeal again. But at the first court hearing, he declared his innocence, saying he confessed under pressure. You can say a lot, but arguing with the DNA analysis is pointless. There was only one DNA sample on the victim's body, and it belonged to Benjamin Appleby. Realizing this, his lawyers tried to convince the court that their client did not intend to take Alexandra's life. They said Benjamin admits to taking Alexandra Kemp's life, but denies acting intentionally. However, forensic experts reminded everyone that the criminal was strangling the girl for about 10 minutes. He could have stopped, but did not do it. According to the prosecution, he came to the pool only for one purpose: to watch her. Unfortunately, on June 18, 2002, it was cloudy and the pool was empty. Appleby used it to his advantage. In December 2005, a jury found him guilty. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of filing a petition for parole in 50 years. He received another 19 years for trying to force her into intimacy. In 2019, Appleby appealed the court's decision. The life imprisonment for the first-degree deprivation of life remained in force. The Court of Appeal ruled that an attempt to enter into intimacy with Alexandra was taken into account when passing the first sentence. Thus, Appleby was sentenced twice for the same act. Based on this, the court overturned the second conviction. Still, even if released on parole, Appleby will be 81 years old at that time. The authorities involved in the investigation admitted they found the criminal thanks to Roger Kemp's perseverance. When Appleby was behind bars, Roger and his wife created a self-defense class for girls, thanks to which tens of thousands of girls and women across the country learned basic self-defense techniques. As for the idea of using billboards, it was not new. Back in 1991, after the death by strangulation of 34-year-old Kathy Page, her father started placing billboards criticizing the police, and this story inspired the creators of the film 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. However, after Roger Kemp posted a sketch of the suspect on billboards, people started using this method throughout the country. Moreover, many use it to this day. Roger's persistence in the investigation and his subsequent activities for the benefit of society did not go unnoticed. Barack Obama awarded him a Presidential Citizens Medal at the White House. Roger Kemp passed away at 77 on March 1, 2022. Until the last day of his life, he worked in a foundation named after his daughter. He said he would consider all his efforts successful if it helped save at least one person. This story originates in 2016 in the Argentine city of Mendoza. On January 10, 2016, 21-year-old Marina Menegazzo and 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney went on a long-awaited journey. However, it eventually became one of Latin America's most high-profile investigations over the past decade. In 2016, 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney studied economics at the National University of Cuyo, and 21-year-old Marina Menegazzo studied speech therapy at the Aconcagua University. Both girls worked as volunteers in an organization that helped people forced to live on the street for one reason or another. Friends and acquaintances described them as 2 very cheerful girls who were very close to their families. Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney went on a trip with 2 other friends with whom they eventually split up. The girls set off on January 10th. One could follow their route by looking through Maria Jose Coney's Instagram posts. On January 13th, the girls were in the Peruvian city of Cusco. This ancient city is the former capital of the Inca Empire. The next day, January 14th, an image was published, also taken in Cusco. The following image was published on January 15th. The picture was taken on a railway bridge near the Machu Picchu hydroelectric power plant. Machu Picchu is an ancient Inca city that people call the city above the clouds. It is one of the most famous attractions in Peru and is part of the UNESCO World Heritage List. Judging by the activity on Instagram, the girls stayed in the area for several days. On January 18th, Maria posted 2 more photos from there. On January 19th, the girls said goodbye to the city of Cusco by posting this image. 4 days later, on January 23rd, the girls were already in Ecuador. Maria posted a picture taken on the beach of Montanita. For the next 10 days, the girls traveled along the coast of Ecuador and then went into the inland. On February 4th, Maria posted this image taken in San Antonio, and on February 6th, a photo from Baños. On February 10th, Maria posted a photo showing all 4 girls. The journey that began on January 10th was ending, and it was a kind of farewell post as 2 girls from this company were returning home to Argentina. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo still had about 10 days of vacation. They were in no hurry to return home. Instead, they returned to Montanita, which was the beginning of their acquaintance with Ecuador. On February 22nd, Maria posted a photo of herself with Marina. This post was the last on her Instagram account. On February 22nd, the girls also contacted their families in Argentina. They said they would soon be home. They had to take a bus from Ecuador to the Peruvian city of Lima, spend the night at their friend's house, and fly from Lima to Santiago, the capital of Chile, on February 25th. From there, they would take the bus to their native Mendoza in Argentina. At the same time, the girls warned their relatives that it would be difficult to contact them by phone for a couple of days due to a poor signal. However, Their relatives couldn't contact the girls either in a couple of days or later. There was no activity on Maria and Marina's social media accounts, and their relatives began to worry. Marina's sister was the first to bring attention to this case on social media. She posted a photo of two girls with the following phrase: "My sister and her friend disappeared on Monday the 22nd in Montanita, Ecuador. Please spread this information." The girls' families wanted to know if they had left the country and boarded the flight. However, they couldn't get a response from the airline representatives. The latter stated they would disclose this information only after the families provided a court order. Moreover, the friends in whose house the girls planned to spend the night before departure said they didn't appear. Therefore, the relatives of Maria and Marina called the emergency service in Ecuador and reported the disappearance. They also contacted the consulate of Argentina and asked for help. The consulate intervened in the case on February 27th. Argentina's authorities sent fingerprints of both girls to Ecuador, and they did it for a reason. A few days before, on February 25th, an unidentified woman's body was found in Montanita and transported to Guayaquil. Comparing the fingerprints obtained from the Argentine police with the fingerprints of an unidentified body, they established that this body belonged to Maria Jose Coney. On Saturday, February 27th, after examining the place where they found Maria's body, the police found the body of Marina Menegazzo. It was only 43 yards from Maria's body. Both bodies were in plastic bags wrapped with duct tape. According to the information voiced by the Ecuadorian police, they didn't find Marina's body right away because the criminal tried to hide it by putting something on top of it. During the autopsy, the medical expert established that Maria Jose Coney died from blunt force trauma to the head. She had injuries described as genital by the Ecuadorian authorities and a broken femur and a toe. Moreover, marks on Maria's wrists indicated that she was tied up. Marina Menegazzo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck. She had the same spots on her wrists, which meant she was tied up too. According to the reports, the girls died on February 23rd. Toxicological analysis showed that their blood contained a large amount of the drug used in psychiatric treatment. Given the circumstances of the death, the police concluded that the girls did not voluntarily take this drug, and perhaps they did not even know that they had taken it. It meant someone could have mixed it into their food or drinks. But just 24 hours after discovering the second body, there was a new development in this case, and it caused a mixed reaction among the girls' families. The president and the minister of the Interior of Ecuador announced that the police had solved the case. They arrested 33-year-old Alberto Segundo Mina Ponce and 39-year-old Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, who pleaded guilty and told how the events unfolded. The police found bloodstains in the house of one of the accused, Mina Ponce. Marina's mobile phone, backpack, and other items were near the house. The most strange thing, apart from the quick arrest, was the instant confession of the two men. It caused a resonance among the people who followed this case. The men told their version of everything that happened. Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, Jose Serrano, said the girls left the hotel where they rented a room on February 22nd at 2 p.m. Someone stole all their money at the hotel, so they planned to hitchhike to Lima. But this version was refuted by the owner of the hotel, who claimed that no one stole from the girls. Maria and Marina's families also didn't believe this story. After all, they had credit cards with them. Therefore, the girls would use them in case of financial problems, and yet there was no activity on the cards. Perhaps someone stole both their cash and credit cards. Still, we can use the funds in the account without having the card. For example, girls could pay for a trip online, but they didn't. Then, according to Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, the girls went into one of the bars and asked for a couple of glasses of water to quench their thirst. The bar's owner confirmed this version, saying she gave the girls water because they had no money. It will remain unclear whether someone actually stole all the money from Maria and Marina. Revealing the further development of events, the minister referred to the testimony of suspects who, let me remind you, fully admitted their guilt. So, Ponce said that on that day, at about 8 p.m., Rodriguez told him about two Argentinian girls in a bar. They approached the girls together and started a conversation, during which Marina and Maria said they were hitchhiking to Lima because they didn't have money for a bus. And this version also raises a lot of questions. The girls had bought plane tickets from Lima to Santiago in Chile. Why would they save money on credit cards and try to hitchhike more than 1,000 miles knowing they could miss the plane? As previously mentioned, they bought the tickets for February 25th, and this conversation, according to Ponce, took place on the evening of February 22nd. Sounds dubious, right? But on the other hand, witnesses found by the local police confirmed all these strange versions. Since it was already late and the girls needed somewhere to spend the night, but had no money for a hotel or hostel, Ponce offered them to spend the night at his house. The girls agreed. The police found a taxi driver who confirmed he drove Marina, Maria, and Ponce to this home. This picture shows the house where Ponce lived. Next, following the information voiced by the Ecuadorian authorities, Ponce returned to the bar and started drinking with Rodriguez. Marina and Maria were alone in the house at that time. The heavily drunk men returned home at about 2:30 a.m., but Maria and Marina were not there. The police found out that the girls went to a store near the house to buy soda. The exact type of the drink remains unknown. The police again found a witness who confirmed this, a store cashier. If this is true, it means the girls still had some cash. According to Ponce's testimony, when the girls returned to the house, he stayed in the room with Maria Coney, and Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Menegazzo. Ponce admitted that he wanted to persuade Maria Coney to intimacy, but she resisted and tried to leave the house. Then he grabbed a stick and hit the girl on the head, from which she died instantly. At the same time, he heard a scream from the other room. Entering the room, he saw that Rodriguez had taken Marina Menegazzo's life. Rodriguez left the house immediately after that. According to Ponce, he started thinking about how to get rid of the bodies. Ponce tried to clean up all traces in the house and wrapped the bodies in plastic bags and duct tape. In the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from someone he knew and took them to a wasteland near the ocean shore about 440 yards from home. Let me remind you again that everything mentioned is the official version of the Ecuadorian authorities. At the same time, there was no explanation of where the marks on the girls' wrists came from. There was also no explanation for the toxicological analysis that said the blood of both girls contained traces of a potent drug. Given all the circumstances and inconsistencies in the case, the girls' families started doubting the version presented by the Ecuadorian authorities. They believed this case could be related to human trafficking and that the Ecuadorian authorities were covering for someone. Marina and Maria's families had several reasons for doubt. Firstly, the girls ran out of money but did not use credit cards. Secondly, they were under the influence of drugs. The only people who saw Maria and Marina that day were the ones who confirmed the authorities' version: the bar's owner, a taxi driver, and a cashier who allegedly sold the girls soda, and the town had 5,000 residents. Also, the families could not understand why the bodies were found with a difference of 2 days while they were 43 yards from each other. Moreover, it seemed strange that Maria and Marina turned to Ponce and Rodriguez for help. There are always a lot of Argentine tourists in Montanita, and it would be more logical for the girls to approach a person from their country and ask for help. The brother of one of the victims said he saw used syringes lying on the floor when the Ecuadorian police brought him to the crime scene. When he asked about them, they magically disappeared. Moreover, those syringes weren't even in crime scene photos, and the experts who examined the place denied their existence. According to the family, the two men were just a cover for something bigger, such as human trafficking. The authorities scheduled a second autopsy and a new toxicological examination. In addition, it turned out that both defendants repeatedly changed their version of events. According to one version, Mina Ponce denied that he and Rodriguez committed this crime. He stated that the man who took the girls' lives was an illegal substance dealer of Venezuelan origin who lived in the area. The only thing he knew about the man was that his pseudonym was El Chamo. The police detained this man. However, the latter stated he had nothing to do with what happened and was ready to take a polygraph test or give his DNA sample. He wanted to prove he wasn't in that house at all. Several DNA samples were found at the crime scene. DNA from Mina Ponce, DNA from the two dead girls, and several unidentified samples. These unidentified samples did not belong to Rodriguez, the alleged second perpetrator, nor to El Chamo, who was ruled out as a suspect after undergoing all DNA tests. After the second autopsy, conducted by experts from Argentina, it became clear that both girls were in such a state that they could not defend themselves. Before their deaths, they were both forced into intimacy. The autopsy also gave other details. Maria Jose had bruises and scratches only on one side of her body, as if someone had thrown her out of a moving car. A new toxicological analysis again confirmed that both girls were under the influence of a potent drug used in psychiatric treatment. This drug suppresses the will of a person. What happened next caused a resonance throughout Latin America. Unfortunately, as it often happens, people made the girls responsible for their deaths. Moreover, they were blamed not only by ordinary internet users, but also by well-known public people. One of those who believed the girls were to blame for what happened to them was the Deputy Minister of Tourism of Ecuador, Maria Cristina Rivadeneira. During the same days as the news about the death of Maria and Marina appeared, Berlin held a fair dedicated to tourism. There, Rivadeneira gave an interview to a German news agency in which she said that given the way the girls traveled, something had to happen to them sooner or later. She also added that she had never been to Montanita since this place did not correspond to her social status. It was essentially victim blaming at the state level, and that is a very sad fact. After Rivadeneira gave this interview, the Ecuadorian government apologized to the families of Maria and Marina and fired the woman. One of the most condemned people was the Argentine psychiatrist Hugo Narietin, who called the girls favorable victims, mentioning that such people make other people commit crimes. After a firestorm of criticism, the doctor claimed that people had misunderstood him and that he never absolved criminals of responsibility. In response to hundreds of comments on the internet that the girls were to blame for what happened to them, a student from Paraguay, Guadalupe Acosta, wrote a post on Facebook on behalf of Maria and Marina. It went viral and had 700,000 reposts in the first week after publication. "Yesterday I was killed." The post began with these words. "I refused to be touched, and they cracked my skull open with a stick. Like waste, they put me in a black plastic bag, wrapped with duct tape, and threw me on the beach, where they found me a few hours later. But the humiliation that followed was worse than death. After they found my lifeless body, no one asked who ended my dreams, hopes, and life. No, instead, they started asking me useless questions. What clothes were you wearing? Why were you alone? Why would a woman travel alone? You were in a dangerous area. What did you expect? They told our parents we must have taken something forbidden and that we must have done something wrong. After I died, I realized I was not equal to a man. The fact that I died was my mistake, and it will always be so. But if the headline said about 2 dead young male travelers, people would express their condolences. With their fake and hypocritical double-standard speech, they would demand the highest penalty for criminals. But it is different when you're a woman. I ask you on behalf of myself and other women silenced by the world. I ask you for every woman with a crushed life and dreams. Raise your voice. Let's fight. I will be next to you in spirit, and I promise that one day there will be so many of us that there won't be enough bags in the world to shut us all up." The trial began on August 8, 2016. There were many failures in the case. The prosecutor changed 3 times, which significantly delayed the process. The prosecution presented witness statements and more than 200 physical evidence from the crime scene. The police found some of the girls' belongings, biological fluids, and phones in the house where the crime occurred and next to it. During the trial, Ponce declared his innocence and said he had confessed under pressure from the police, and this only strengthened the belief of the girls' families that the Ecuadorian authorities were hiding something. Rodriguez also changed his testimony by claiming that some Colombian dealers of banned substances were involved in the girls' deaths. During the first week of the trial, the prosecutor stated that he suspected other persons of involvement in the case since the police had found 3 more samples of male DNA at the scene, along with the DNA of Rodriguez and Ponce. The court sentenced both Alberto Ponce and Eduardo Rodriguez to 40 years in prison, the maximum sentence under the laws of Ecuador. In November 2016, the Ecuadorian authorities announced that they had arrested another person whose DNA they found at the crime scene. This man was 34-year-old José Luis Pérez Castro. His defense argued that he lived in this house a few weeks before the incident, and they found his blood on the wall because of a dental infection he had suffered. He allegedly just spat on the wall. The lawyers also said that the reason the police found his DNA on the girls' bodies was because they had touched a piece of furniture or things that he had also touched earlier. This man's defense began to crumble when his dentist came to testify. As it turned out, Castro did reach out to him. But it was only 2 weeks after the police discovered Marina and Maria's bodies. He asked the dentist to give him a note about a dental infection. However, the doctor refused to write it because he didn't find any health problems after examining Castro. In the end, the dentist just kicked him out. The patient wanted a medical certificate. But for there to be pain, there must be some kind of disease. But I didn't see that when I checked, the dentist stated. The man's defense collapsed after these words. While awaiting trial and contrary to prison rules, Castro appeared on social networks, referring to the situation that put him behind bars. I am waiting for this injustice happening to me all this time to end. I have great faith that God will lead me out of this with victory, Castro said on his social media account. Despite denying his guilt to the end, José Luis Pérez Castro, just like Alberto Ponce and Eduardo Rodriguez, was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The girls' families doubted the story presented by the Ecuadorian authorities, even considering that the families ensured that police officers from Argentina participated in the investigation. The version of the Ecuadorian authorities has not changed in any way. According to the assurances of the Ecuadorian police, the search for other men whose samples the police found in the house continues to this day. Take a look at this photo. It shows Rexford Lynn Keel Jr., better known as Lynn Keel, and his wife Elizabeth Bess Edwards Keel. They were married for over 20 years. In 2005, Lynn worked as a truck driver, and Elizabeth was an employee of Microbac Laboratories. Probably many of us have pictures that, when we look at them, we realize that shortly after the picture was taken, the lives of the people depicted in it changed dramatically. These words can be fully applied to this one as well. Lynn and Elizabeth lived in this house, which is located in Nash County, North Carolina. As you can see on the map, the place is quite secluded. As 2005 drew to a close, Lynn and Elizabeth, like many people, were making plans for the next year. But on January 1st, 2006, trouble came to their house. It was cold, and the steps outside the house were covered in ice. As Elizabeth was leaving the house, she slipped and fell, hitting her head hard on the corner of the concrete steps. The injury she sustained was fatal. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy concluded that Elizabeth had died from a blunt force trauma to the head, and her death was ruled an accident. For her husband, relatives, colleagues, and friends, Elizabeth's sudden death was a great shock. She was only 42 years old. About 1 year passed and Lynn Keel decided to move on. He was no longer a truck driver, but worked in real estate. In 2007, he visited Latin America in a work-related visit. On that trip, Lynn, who was 45 years old at the time, met Diana, who was 19 years his junior. Diana was from Bogota, Colombia. She was strikingly beautiful, kind, and a single mom with a daughter. The relationship between them quickly developed, and with her thoughts of the American dream, Diana moved to the United States. She and Lynn began living in his home in Nash County, where about a year earlier, his wife Elizabeth Keel had died in an accident. It wasn't long before Diana and Lynn were married, and a short time later the couple had a son named Max. In 2017, Diana graduated from Nash Community College. That same year, she began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center. The first few years of their life together were nothing special, but over time their relationship began to deteriorate. Diana told her close friend that Lynn was an overbearing man who spoke sharply to her and very often verbally abused her. The atmosphere in the house was almost always very tense. Lynn would not allow Diana to be alone with anyone for long periods of time. She began to think about divorce, but she was afraid of her husband because he threatened her. He manipulated her with the baby. He threatened her and told her that if she left him, he would deport her and that she would never see her son again. Diana put up with it all because her children came first for her, but everyone's patience comes to an end sooner or later. In 2019, Diana's daughter Laura was 18, a graduate of Southern Nash High School and a freshman at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and 10-year-old Max was living with his parents. As I said, Diana worked as a nurse at Wilson Medical Center. She was loved and respected by patients and colleagues alike. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received a message in which Diana wrote, "Mom, I love you very much." The message came completely out of the blue. Esperanza knew her daughter didn't have a happy marriage and that she wanted to divorce her husband but was afraid of him. It was only 3 days after that, and Diana's daughter Laura sounded the alarm. On March 10th, she tweeted out a plea for help to find her mother. The message said, "This is insane. You see this happen to everyone else, and you don't think it's ever going to happen to you guys. My mom is missing. If you see or hear anything, please let me know. And please retweet this. Help me get the word out. Thank you." That same day, Laura called the medical center where her mother worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had spoken to her in the past 2 days. An employee of the medical center called the police and asked for a welfare check on Diana. A co-worker told the dispatcher that Diana hadn't been heard from in 2 days. "She was supposed to work tonight. She's on the schedule," the Wilson Medical Center nurse said. "She's the type of co-worker. She's always like 30 minutes early. And if you text her, she replies back like reasonably. She has not done any of them." The woman said it was out of character for Diana and asked the sheriff's office to perform a welfare check. Diana was a devoted mother who was in touch with her family every day. She checked her social media regularly, but now her messages went unread and her FaceTime calls unanswered. When a police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn was there. It was surprising that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, not him. Lynn told the police officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days earlier, on March 8th, when she left the house. Her car was still parked outside the house, which also aroused suspicion, so Lynn was called in for questioning. When questioned, Keel, 57, said his wife had gone out to run some errands and hadn't returned. He said she would leave from time to time and wouldn't return for several days. It was a statement that didn't ring true. Without any charges, the man was released. Diana was reported missing and the police began searching for her. Investigators were able to determine that the woman had not used her cell phone or bank cards in the past few days, and that was not a good sign. This house, as I said at the beginning of the video, is in a secluded location, and there are no neighbors to share any important information with the police. Nevertheless, detectives learned that on the morning of March 8th, the couple was seen having a heated argument on their front porch. A courier had delivered a package addressed to Diana that day, and he was the last person to see her, not counting Lynn Keel, of course. After the police interviewed Diana's co-workers, who told them that she was having problems with her husband, there was no doubt that she would not abandon her son and run away. The only thing that stopped her from divorcing was the fear of losing custody of her 10-year-old son. Everyone the detectives spoke to named only one person they thought might have been involved in Diana's disappearance. That person was her husband, Lynn Keel. Early in the investigation, An ominous discovery was made. 2 years before Diana went missing, Lynn had insured her life for more than $1 million, and he was the sole beneficiary of this insurance. In 2008, sheriff's deputies responded to a domestic dispute in the house, although no further action was taken. Only 2 days had passed since the investigation began, and the police received a disturbing call. During the emergency call, a man, later identified as an employee of the North Carolina Department of Transportation, said he found something on Polk's Hole Road. "It looks like something is laying in the woods," he said. "I don't know what it is. A body, a something, I don't know." "How far down is it?" the dispatcher asked. "Right here at the end," the caller said. "I will be waiting right here." Unfortunately, what the man who called the police saw was Diana's body, which from the looks of it had been there since the day she disappeared. It turned out that the worker was checking an illegal dump when he saw something suspicious. Polk's Hole Road is a dead-end street leading to farmland, and the fact that the body was found was fortunate, if fortunate is the right word under the circumstances. Who knows how long it would have taken the police to find Diana's body, for it was 30 miles away from her home. "I've heard nobody that knew her had anything negative to say about this woman," Nash County Sheriff Keith Stone said. "What a tragic event. Even more tragic, we now have a 10-year-old without a mom." Stone added, "It's very difficult, especially when I see life as it is and how fragile it is, and now we have a kid without a mother. It's very difficult. We have a lot of unanswered questions. That's the reason we, as the Nash County Sheriff's Office, operate with compassion, honor, and diligence." Although it remains unclear how the woman died, there is definitely foul play involved. The police had only one suspect, Lynn Keel. When he was informed that his wife had been found dead, he was very surprised. He was brought to the station for questioning, where he answered to investigators. He claimed, as before, that Diana had often gone away for several days, but that she had always returned. These words were inconsistent with what Diana's colleagues, relatives, and friends had said. Everyone knew that Lynn Keel controlled his wife's every move. He even forbade her to see her friends. After the interrogation, the man was released because the results of the autopsy had not yet been obtained. 2 days after the discovery of the body, authorities officially confirmed that the body was that of Diana Alejandra Keel. Her death was a painful blow to her children, family, and friends. Diana's daughter Laura created a GoFundMe page to help cover the funeral costs. "My priorities now are to make sure my mother is laid to rest in a manner much more fitting than her death, and to make sure my brother continues to feel the love that our mother shared with us daily," she wrote. "By doing so, I hope to honor my mother's legacy." Diana's cousin living in Colombia told reporters that the mother of two came to North Carolina to live the American dream, but it ended up being a nightmare. "I can't believe it," said Javier Guevara. "I can't believe it. It's very, very sad." After the medical examiner's report was obtained, the frightening details of Diana's death became known. She had extensive skull fractures as well as multiple sharp injuries on the left side of her face and neck. Some of the injuries were post-mortem, which could mean that the person who inflicted them had a personal grudge against Diana. By the time police arrived to arrest Lynn Keel and search his home, he had gone on the run. He was put on a nationwide wanted list, and a report stated that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and warned that he might be dangerous. It was learned that after Lynn Keel left the police station after being questioned, he drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and fled. According to a warrant to search the home Diana and Lynn Keel shared, authorities seized a variety of firearms, including rifles, pistols, and revolvers. Also seized were swords, a machete, and several knives. Warrants show that authorities found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana Keel's 18-year-old daughter inside a Dodge Ram Lynn Keel owned. When the sheriff was asked about their contents, he replied that he did not feel comfortable divulging what was written on those pages. Meanwhile, the search for Lynn Keel continued. It was determined that he had left the state, but his whereabouts were unknown. Stone said the sheriff's office had received calls from Texas and Florida about Keel's truck, but no additional details about his capture were confirmed. He asked the public to drive by local motels and hotels and see if they would notice a pickup truck with the license plate number listed on the information sheet distributed. "We have no idea where he might be," he said. "This is an opportunity for the public to help because this person is dangerous." On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was discovered, Lynn Keel was seized by Arizona State Police 34 miles from the U.S. border with Mexico. He was in possession of a large sum of cash and a large quantity of various canned goods. He was allegedly planning to cross the border and escape into Mexican territory. After his arrest, Lynn Keel was airlifted to Nash County, where he was charged in connection with the death of his wife, Diana. Experts believed she was still alive when she was loaded into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left for dead. Lynn Keel was therefore also charged with kidnapping. When searching the house, forensic investigators found overwhelming evidence that the attack on Diana took place in the bedroom. According to the prosecutor, after taking Diana to a remote area, Keel went to a local Walmart where he bought cleaning supplies, with which he tried to cover up evidence of the crime. After he was arrested, Diana's daughter, Laura, wrote the following words on her Facebook account. "I know everyone has a certain feeling towards what my stepdad did to my family. However, I beg all of you not to spread hate. My brother has such a pure heart that he doesn't need to see that hate. We all need to focus on how wonderful my mother was to heal us as best we can." The brutal nature of the crime and Keel's subsequent flight from justice drew local, state, and national media attention to the case. The media attention caused the public defender at the time to ask for a change in venue so that a jury pool could be selected outside of Nash County. Despite the widespread nature of the media attention focused on the crime, the motion for a change in venue focused specifically on the perceptions in Nash County. The media coverage included, among other things, press conferences by the Nash County Sheriff, many written articles in local newspapers, online articles, television coverage, as well as social media discussion. Discussion in the media included speculation surrounding the passing of the defendant's previous wife, the motion stated. The state objected to the motion, but did note that the state had concerns over efficiency and a waste of resources and time should a trial begin in Nash County and then be required to be transferred to another venue after the trial process begins in Nash County, the motion stated. In the end, Nash County Superior Court Judge Quentin Sumner decided to move the venue to Pitt County. In the document outlining his decision, Sumner stated that there exists in Nash County a prejudice against this defendant so that he cannot obtain a fair and impartial trial within Nash County. In October 2021, Rexford Lynn Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges against him to avoid a lengthy trial. A no contest plea, similar to a guilty plea, means that the defendant accepts responsibility for the charge. Keel pled to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense attorneys asked that the judge takes into account that he has been experiencing kidney failure and has been incarcerated for the past 2 years. But at sentencing, Diana's mother reminded the court of the reason her daughter was no longer alive. She said she wanted to tell women that if their partner was abusive, they needed to run. "Don't stay there," she begged, as she asked the judge for a severe sentence. "I want you to have the same compassion for Keel that he had when he killed her." Diana's cousin released the following statement. "From all of Diana Alejandra Keel's family, we want to extend a huge thank you to all law enforcement involved in apprehending and bringing Lynn Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder, to face justice. I want to express the immense gratitude our family has felt, including the true empathy from the Nash County Sheriff's Office, along with so many heartfelt messages of support and love since this nightmare began. We know Diana Alejandra has been seen by the public for the amazing mother, daughter, sister, cousin, friend, and co-worker that she was. She loved her two children more than I can ever express. Everything she did was for them. She brought joy into this world with her contagious laugh, bright smile, and huge heart for others, including animals. To all that knew her, and those that would have liked to have known her, please think of her and her children only with the kindest thoughts and positive energy possible. Thank you so much for your continued support. Lynn Keel did not say what the motive for the crime was. Perhaps he learned that Diana was meeting with a lawyer and wanted to begin divorce proceedings. We should also not forget the insurance policy worth more than $1 million. Under the plea agreement, Lynn Keel was sentenced to between 32 and 41 years in prison. But that's not all. Police had questions relating to the death of Lynn Keel's first wife, Elizabeth. Was her death really an accident? Her family said they always had questions about her death. In a statement, Elizabeth Keel's family said they have always questioned Bess's death and feel deeply saddened that another life has now been taken. We're going to work all the leads on that, and we're going to go back and look at the information we had on the first incident reports, Stone said. We're going to talk with the district attorney's office. It's something that we need to be looking at. Elizabeth Keel is buried in a family plot in Spring Hope. Stone said right now he is working with a pathologist and going over all of the evidence. He said there is a strong possibility they will exhume Elizabeth Keel's body. Dr. John Butts was the chief medical examiner in North Carolina for 24 years. One would only go to exhume a body if there was some question that wasn't addressed at the time that could be addressed by re-examining the remains, Butts said. According to him, there have been many cases in his career where a death deemed accidental turned out to be murder. Someone falls off of something and was killed, and then additional information turns out that they didn't fall. They were pushed, and there would be no difference in examination. We'd have the same findings, but of course now the circumstances leading up to why it happened have changed, Butts said. No new information related to the death of Elizabeth Keel has appeared over the past 2 years. We can assume that authorities have found no reason to reopen the investigation and exhume the body, but it is possible that we will hear more about this case in the future.